This is a novel you need to read. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the conversation. I'm David Schuster. If you're like me and you like novels that are about other countries and America's relationship with them, particular adversaries, you're going to love this one. It's a new novel. It's called The World We Wish. It's by John Moody. He's been a lifetime journalist. He was an executive for 22 years at Fox News. Full disclosure, back in 1996, John hired me to Fox News, and I was there for a couple of years. We had a whale of a time, and then we all decided it was probably good for me to leave Fox News. But that was 20 years ago, and I've always maintained my respect and admiration for John. John, congratulations on this book, this novel. It's the sequel to a novel that came out about China called Of Course They Knew, Of Course They ... That was about the beginnings of the pandemic. This one is about artificial intelligence. Explain why.
Well, David, first of all, the respect is mutual, and thanks for having me back on. Sure. David, China has such a huge advantage over the rest of the world, including the United States, in the research and application of artificial intelligence that it really bore scrutiny, and that's what this book is about. I fear that because artificial intelligence is just a term that we throw around now without really knowing what it entails, that we're missing the danger of letting China get so far ahead of us.
And you tell this story, this novel, through fictional characters, but based on sort of real world events. Is there an architect of China's artificial intelligence program? And is it that person's or the government's mission to conquer the metaverse, as you put it?
The answer is yes to both questions, David. There certainly is a head of China's artificial intelligence program. It's not the name that I used in the book, of course. And the specific stated reason for that position and that entity is stated by the Communist Party quite openly, to become the world's leading source of artificial intelligence applications and to use it for the betterment and goodness of the party.
And for the goodness of the party, that means their ability to essentially track through artificial intelligence, literally the movements of all of their people, and to essentially put down people who may be dissidents. And that technology, that ability to track, helps them with their sort of goal of worldwide communism with Chinese characteristics.
That's exactly right, David. Couldn't have put it better. Look, they don't just want to control their own people. They don't just want to follow them. They want to follow everybody in the world. And I know that sounds ludicrous, but it is not beyond their capabilities to install applications and software in the tools that we all use that are made in China. And what we never look for is in the software of it, what's in there that we don't understand, and how is it all getting back to China as quickly as it does? Let me give you one quick example. Sure. The door monitors and cameras that we all put into our houses now, for very good reasons, to avoid crime and to see who's knocking at the door, et cetera. Most of those are made in China, and most of that history, that recorded history on our door answering machines, goes to China.
And what does China then do with something like that in a worst case scenario?
Right now, nothing. They just store it, because the Chinese don't think in terms of news cycles like you and I did when we were at Fox. They think in terms of 40 and 50 and 100 years. And they'll have that material, they'll have that information, who knocked on your door or who rang your doorbell at 4:30 yesterday afternoon. And if it's someone that you didn't really want other people to know was coming to your door, they know that too. And so there'll be a time when they decide to use it. And that's when Americans have to understand what they're doing when they use Chinese made products.
And so there's the potential, I suppose, for blackmail for anybody, but particularly, I suppose, for our government leaders or future leaders. The Chinese may have something on them. And what does China ultimately expect? I mean, is it a sort of a 40 or 50-year plan in terms of how this plays out?
I believe it is, David. I think they have a shorter range objective, and that involves the so-called metaverse. It's another one of those terms that we're not quite sure what it means. Does it just mean, you put something on your head and you can slay dragons with a lightsaber, or is it more than that? And of course, we're being told by the head of Meta, the former Facebook, that someday we will all live our lives. I'm going to emphasize that, live our lives in the metaverse. That's a very chilling statement.
Well, John, you get at these issues with a really compelling narrative and these same sort of cast of characters that you had in your first novel. Tell me a little bit about more and sort of their development.
Yeah, one of the problems with being an author is you fall in love with your own characters. And I thought that both of the characters that I've taken forward in this book were interesting enough, and that their interactions were interesting enough, and the things that they believed and taught each other were interesting enough to validate a sequel. Now, in this sequel, I am moving my characters from just the idea of artificial intelligence into another new era product, which is called the metaverse. A lot of people don't know what the metaverse is. They think it just means putting on a headset over your eyes and around your head, and you get put into a fake setting where you're slaying dragons with a lightsaber, and it's just a game. It can be a lot more than that, and it is very quickly developing into more than that. We're being told by the head of Meta, Mark Zuckerberg, that someday we literally, and he means it literally, will live our entire lives in the metaverse.
And we got a taste of that during the pandemic, where we were all essentially meeting through Zooms and remote, and essentially now there's going to be this ability, imagine that times 1,000 in terms of the experience. But the danger, of course, is that there's data with all of that, right?
Everything that you do and even think when you're in the metaverse is transmitted to the maker of that program, and China is by far the leading provider of these programs.
Now, I can understand why China has the impulse to sort of be such a leader in all this, but how come the United States has fallen so far behind? Is it because of policy? Is it because our leaders are not paying attention, or maybe they don't understand it?
David, I really think, and this is a nonpartisan complaint on my part, I really think that our political leaders just don't want to spend the time and effort that it takes to understand the depth of the issues about artificial intelligence, and leading on from that, the metaverse. They're more interested in making points about patriotism and this and that, which is not inconsiderable, but you also have to be smart enough and broad thinking enough to take in all the problems. And truly, our future is lagging behind that of China when it comes to this technology.
When we last had you on, you pointed out that the power of China is growing while it's sort of essentially diminishing among Western powers, and that China is slowly essentially crushing us. What have you seen over the last year that gives you the greatest pause?
I think the same thing that you saw a couple of weeks ago. Xi Jinping, the maximum leader of China, being given an unprecedented third 5-year term. And believe me, he is now as powerful as Mao Zedong ever was. He is as powerful as Joseph Stalin ever was in the Soviet Union. And this guy has big plans, and they include taking over Taiwan by force or by diplomacy, and bringing the Western world, most especially the United States, to heel. And so that, as you pointed out earlier, we all live in socialism with Chinese characteristics.
How much of China's ambitions for Taiwan have perhaps been put on hold or altered because of Russia's war in Ukraine, and what the world response has been to that?
I think by a certain number of months, possibly a year, but Xi Jinping is watching very carefully. He probably thinks that his armed forces are far superior to those of Russia, and he might be right. And he also is looking to see how the West in general, I don't mean just the United States, but the West, responds to more and more threats, against Taiwan. And when he sees what the West has failed to do in response to the invasion of Ukraine, he's got to feel pretty good about his chances.
Your novel, in addition to being a great read and of course bringing up all these challenges that the United States faces, it comes at a time when it seems like our politics seems even more hopelessly sort of deadlocked, and the partisanship and the extremes seem to be growing. Are you optimistic or pessimistic that the US political system, that we have the ability to somehow come together and at least try to address some of these issues? Or should we just sort of forget about it and get used to the idea that no, we are always going to be behind China, and we have to prepare for the day when China uses all of this data to dominate the United States in some capacity?
Well, I don't think it's inevitable, David, but I think that it's very possible that we will fall behind them permanently. They plan ahead. They don't have different opinions from different political parties. They don't have the endless back and forth bantering that we have in Washington, because if you say no to Xi Jinping, you're likely not to be around tomorrow. Some people might think that that's not a bad idea, but the United States just simply can't do it that way. That's not who we are. I think that we can always call on the American spirit. We can always call on American ideals, but we have to do it as one people. It's no good doing it in divided fashion and blaming everybody else for what's going on.
And speaking of people, we have a number of people at the Young Turks who reside in Pittsburgh, including our publishing team. And the main character in your novel, I believe his name is Henry. He hails from Pittsburgh, and you have some connections to Pittsburgh. And so there's a third novel also involving Henry that's in the works?
You've heard it here first, folks. Yes, there's a third one coming. It'll be the final part of the trilogy, and it will resolve a lot of issues while raising others.
Well, if there's anybody who's going to be a heroine and save all of us from all of these dastardly conflicts that we face, of course it's going to be somebody from Pittsburgh. So in any case, the novel is World We Wish. It's by John Moody. This is the sequel to the previous novel, Of Course They Knew, Of Course They ... The World We Wish is about artificial intelligence and the metaverse and the challenge from China. John, always great having you on the program. Let us know when the third one comes out. We'll have you right back on to talk about that one.
You'll be the first to know, David. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Welcome back to the conversation, everybody. I'm David Schuster, and I've got another great book for you to read. It's called From Scratch. It's a book about sort of where food comes from, not only the compelling interconnectedness of the supply chain, but also where the food itself is sort of produced and harvested. But this isn't just a book about food or about the journey through the infrastructure that helps produce it. It's a remarkable story told by somebody who's an incredible storyteller. David Moscow is an actor. He is a writer, show host, also the author. Some folks maybe remember him from his acting days when he was in the movie Big, playing the young Tom Hanks. We'll talk about that in a second. But David, where did you develop this love of food and traveling to discover it?
Wow. Well, I love to eat. My mom is an incredible cook growing up, and I was sort of her sous chef. And then I had this epiphany. It was actually around the 2016 election, and I was sitting in a Korean barbecue joint out here in LA, and I looked back into the back of the kitchen, and there was a Mexican guy making food, and I thought about how important Central Americans are. They're the backbone of American food industry, and it was pretty crazy that the Republicans were going after and demonizing sort of particularly Mexicans, but immigrants. And I said, you know, what'd be cool is to make a documentary about how tacos are made and how margaritas are made, right? Margaritas is the #1 cocktail in America, and tacos are second or third in the fast food world. And I just thought that it would be really neat to go to Oaxaca and work with subsistence corn farmers, make masa, make its taco, and then show the hard work that goes on behind the scenes, and how we're all sort of tied through food. And then that, you know, you in Hollywood, you have dreams of movies and that gets shelved, but it turned into a television show called From Scratch that was on A&E channel, our History channel. And then a book came out of it. And the book was, when you're doing something on cable, you don't necessarily always get a chance to ask really deep questions. And when you run into some interesting things, you kind of have to put them to the side. And a book felt like a really neat place to do a deeper dive on some of these things.
And that deeper dive includes sort of where things are going well in terms of food supply. And I was fascinated, you write about sort of the oyster harvesting off of the coast of Long Island and how that's essentially making up or starting to make up for sort of the terrible situation that involves shellfish in the Mediterranean. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so you know, oysters collapsed. The oyster industry in New York collapsed around, you know, the middle 1900s. The water became too polluted. Also, they were competing with, when refrigerated train cars came around, you could then transport cattle. And it was a lot cheaper to raise 500 pounds of protein than the 3 years it took to raise 3 ounces of protein. So the oysters kind of got shelved. And but since pollution has started to reverse, And we realize there's a lot of health benefits with oysters. Zinc, particularly, during COVID, oysters would have been an incredible healthy alternative to beef. And also, they do a wonderful job of cleaning the water themselves. So I talk about how the revitalization of the New York oyster is a wonderful thing. There's a billion oyster project that's going on in New York Harbor, which they're hoping to. New York was the home of the greatest oysters in the world. I mean, people came from all over the world, and they had oysters that were the size of babies. And when new immigrants came to America, they could actually feed themselves down at the shore for free. They would go down and harvest, and hopefully this organization, the Billion Oyster Project, is going to bring that back, which will clean up New York Harbor as well.
You traveled something like 20 countries. I was fascinated to read about you, I guess, milking a water buffalo to make a mozzarella for cheese on pizza in Italy. Was there anything about any of these experiences that surprised you or that stood out?
Oh yeah, I mean, every day it's a bucket list. Every day you're like in awe of the work that these people that the food producers do. I mean, the water buffalo. I'm making mozzarella, buffalo mozzarella in Italy to make one of the best pizzas in the world is in Naples at Da Michele. And so what I do is I first go to the chef, we make the meal, and then I harvest all the ingredients and try and reproduce it. So I go to this water buffalo farm, and they have Mozart playing because the buffaloes produce more milk when listening, when comfortable. And they have these like huge massage parlors for them that they can walk through. But traumatizingly, the best way to milk a water buffalo is to get right behind it, lift the tail, and milk exactly where your face does not want to be. But I managed, I came away unscathed and made some incredible pizza.
Well, it's quite a sacrifice that you made for that. A lot of people are going to wonder about the impact of the climate crisis, climate change. How has that affected what you saw?
Well, that was one of the big things that we were coming face to face with during the making of the show. And in the book is called From Scratch: Adventures in Harvesting, Hunting, Foraging, and Fishing on a Fragile Planet. And that really, I started out looking at the ties that bind communities through food. It takes 61 people to make a pizza. So even if you think that you've done it all on your own, if you're eating a slice of pizza, you really haven't, right? So that was how I started. And then throughout the journey, I realized that food producers really are at the front lines of global climate change and the fights around social and economic justice. We were in the South China Sea, or we were shooting in the Philippines, so they call it the Philippine Sea. And we went out to get fish for patis, which is fish sauce. It's a foundational Filipino ingredient. And we couldn't catch any fish. And I asked why. And on the TV side, we were like, oh my gosh, we're not gonna catch any fish. But I asked the fisherman why, and he said, we have to go out longer and further than we've ever had. I get 1/10 of what my dad got, and my dad got 1/10 of what his father got. And it turns out that the South China Sea has lost 70% of its fish in the last 20 years. And there's all this territorial dispute that's going on. I mean, China's building islands closer and closer to the Philippines to enlarge their territory, and it's all for fish. And unless people can reach across the territorial boundaries and say, I know you think this is yours and I think it's mine, but there's not going to be any fish here unless we come up with a solution. And you see that in the Mediterranean as well. There's 28 countries which has been hammering the Mediterranean for 10,000 years, and it's empty. We went to go harvest shellfish there. We went to look for octopus there. And again and again, we walked away. I mean, one of the things I have to do is if I don't get what the chef asked for, I bring them like a butternut squash and I say, hey, can we use this instead? And that happened one too many times out there on the road.
David, I don't mean to get all Larry King-like on you, but I gotta ask. I mean, you hit it big when you were very young, as the young Tom Hanks in Big. I know that it can be challenging for a lot of people who have success early on in their life to either replicate that success or feel like they have to, and find some sort of meaning later on. So the two questions out of this was, how did you manage to do it? And secondly, what was it like working with Tom Hanks?
Oh, well, Tom is amazing. He took me and my friends out. I mean, the first time I met him, he was handed a video recorder, and he took me and my friends out to the park and just recorded us playing. And then would be like, here's a ball. You try and stop him from getting the ball. And then he would record it. And all of these things ended up entering into the movie. And not even me, like when we're watching the film, I'll be like, that's Ernest that he's doing right there, who was my best friend at the time. So it was amazing, and to have that be the first project, when you're in sort of a classic like that, it just is a gift for your whole life. Working in any career, I imagine, for 30 years is you have to find new things that keep it fresh. And so I love creative people. I love to facilitate creators. So I started producing on the side. I started writing, and then, when I had my son, I wanted to find, I guess, more meaning in it. Acting sometimes can be a selfish job, and I wanted to see like how I could leave the world better. For my kid, and projects like this that have sort of meaning, a deeper meaning, I think, became more important for me.
So is there a follow-up to this particular project, or are there other sort of genres you want to explore that may be related to either climate crisis or just how sort of vulnerable we may all be?
Yeah, we have so the television show is going to have a spin-off. This is about food. We walk back how food is made. The next one is going to be about home. So if I have to make a faucet, I am going to mine iron, smelt steel, make a mold. If I'm going to do the floor, I'll harvest bamboo and walk it all back. And again, we'll be looking at sort of the hard work that our construction workers and the people who bring us materials. I think as a city person who never knew how any of this stuff was done, again, I look in awe and learning about sort of how things are made. And we're going to look at sort of the future, we're going to see plastic countertops. We're going to try and do alternative insulation. We're going to look at things that were done in the past. We may have sheep wool insulation. So it's going to be, construction is the second worst polluter. So we'll try and see who's doing good things that we can learn from. And then we're going to write a book on that.
David Moscow, the book is From Scratch.
David, and I just want to add real quick, sorry. I co-wrote this with my father, who was a writer on the show, John Moscow.
Well, congratulations to both of you, not only on the book, but also on the successes that you've had, and to be able to find meaning when you've had such a remarkable career already, to find meaning in some of these new projects, particularly when you have kids, I know firsthand is so important and so valuable. David, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you, David.
And that'll do it for this conversation. On behalf of Gina Kim, Asher Cofield, Craig Lowry, and Bart Kyle, I'm David Schuster. Thanks for watching.
Hey everyone, Matteo Scarapo here, author of Black Buck, which is Shop TYT's first fiction book ever. I'm honored. So, Black Buck is about a young man named Darren who's living in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. He lives with his mom, he has his girlfriend, he has his best friend, he has his neighborhood, and his neighborhood has him. Darren's also working at a Starbucks in Midtown Manhattan. And one day, this man, who's real suave and good looking, comes in and asks Darren to give him his regular. But for some reason, Darren says no. This man named Rhett Daniels, who's the CEO of a startup called Someone, located on the 36th floor of the same building, is impressed. And he invites Darren upstairs, and then he extends an offer to join his elite sales team. Darren reluctantly joins, and he soon realizes that he's not the only Black salesperson there. He's the only Black person in the entire company. So he goes through hell and back in order to make it to the top. And once there, he has status, money, power, but he says, you know what? I don't like being the token Black guy. So he hatches a plan to help other people of color infiltrate America's tech startup sales teams, redefining what it means to be a minority in the workplace. This book definitely, if you couldn't tell, touches on many things that are relevant to this moment that we're all living in right now, but it's also connected to the many moments in history that have come before today. I hope that you read it, I hope that you enjoy it, and if you want to order a copy, go to shoptyt.com. Thank you, be well, and happy 2021.
Breaking news with Brett Ehrlich. This is Brett Ehrlich with Breaking News with Brett Ehrlich. Bernie Sanders wants to break Wall Street, and he wants to break it real bad.
Hello, beloveds. I have a big announcement. I'm launching a new daily 1-hour show with the Young Turks called Unbossed with Nina Turner, starting October 17th. We are going to be taking on corruption in all of its forms, whether it's big money, big pharma, the injustice system, the establishment of both parties. All that we love is on the line. They keep coming for the people, not serving the people. Now we're coming for them. Anytime anyone, anywhere tries to take power from the people, that is where we will be together on Unbossed. And not only are we going to take on these people, we're also going to have a little joy while we fight. What is life without having some joy? The channel's already up, so go subscribe now, yes, right now, at youtube.com/unbossed, TYT.
I don't care if you're Christian. In fact, I will fight for you to have your religious liberty and practice your Christianity. I believe in that. I don't believe in Christianity, which means that you do not get to dictate the way I live my life based on your religion. I don't care what the Bible says. You have every right in the world. All those women who identify with your religion have every right in the world to not get an abortion, to not take birth control, but they do not have the right to dictate my life and what I decide to do with my body. I don't care about your goddamn religion. I'm so tired of having nonstop conversations about what the Bible says. You live your life in the way that you interpret the Bible. Again, I don't care, but you don't get to take the Bible and tell me, well, the Bible says this in this chapter, in this verse. I don't care. I don't care. I don't believe in it. And I have the right, based on our Constitution, to not believe in it.
It's up!
Welcome to the Young Turks. Cenk Uygur and Experiment with you guys. Good to be back in the studio for me. In the bonus episode for the members today, I'm going to tell you guys a story from Florida about the Don't Say Gay bill. It's harrowing. It's real. Fascism is here. And unfortunately, there's a lot of stories in today's rundown that talks about that. But hey, mainstream media, IQ, I know, we can't tell. We can't tell who's right and wrong. Nazis or non-Nazis, it's super hard to tell. Anyway, you'll be able to tell in tonight's show. Anna, let's do it.
So I wanted to start off with a bit of a complicated story, but it is one of the most important stories that I don't think is getting enough attention, and it has to do with a Supreme Court case that will begin oral arguments next week, and it could completely gut Medicaid. So let's discuss. Next week, the conservative Supreme Court is set to hear oral arguments in a case that could end up gutting Medicaid. Medicaid, of course, is the state healthcare program that is given to low-income individuals, covering up to 76 million low-income Americans across the country. Now, the case that the Supreme Court will be making a ruling on is known as Health and Hospital Corporation of Marion County versus Tlefsky. Now, this is a case out of Indiana, Indianapolis to be specific. George Tlefsky to be specific, was a patient at this nursing home who was found to have been given all sorts of drugs to sedate him, which goes against Medicaid regulations, right? So this was a Medicaid recipient going to a nursing home that was operated by the state, and it turned out that, according to the accusations, this nursing home was giving him all sorts of drugs to sedate him that they weren't supposed to give him, right? Now, before we get to the details of this case and why it's so important as it pertains to Medicaid, it's important to understand how Medicaid works. Medicaid is administered by the states based on funding that has been provided to the states by the federal government, and the state enters a contract with the federal government, meaning it agrees to the regulations and the rules pertaining to that funding. In order for the states to get that funding from the federal government, they have to agree to abide by these regulations. Now, according to the lawsuit that was filed by Tlefsky, who has since passed away, he was given drugs which violated the regulations and the rules for the funding as it was given from the federal government to the states. Now, in 2020, total federal Medicaid spending was more than $670 billion. But the federal government offers money to each state only if the state agrees to use this money to provide health care to eligible recipients and to comply with certain other conditions. Now, this is relevant to the case that the Supreme Court will hear because of this reason. Now, the plaintiffs in Tlefsky accused the defendants, an Indiana health system operated by local government officials and a private company that manages nursing homes, of violating several provisions of federal law governing nursing homes, including one that prohibits those facilities from using psychotropic drugs for purposes of discipline or convenience and not required to treat the residents' medical symptoms. Currently, at least one of these legal requirements can be enforced through, this is important, private lawsuits, meaning that a patient who believes that their rights under federal Medicaid law have been violated can sue the alleged violator, in this case, the state, through the federal courts, okay? Now, the defendant in this case, the hospital, the Health and Hospital Corporation of Marion County, what they are arguing in this case is that the plaintiff's right to sue should not be a right at all. That should be thrown out. Their ability to sue the state over the way they administer the Medicaid funds should not happen under the federal courts. So let me give you the details on that. The plaintiffs in Tavlevsky accused the defendant, I already read that. Currently, at least some of these legal requirements can be enforced through these private lawsuits, right? There's a specific law in place that allows that to happen. So let's actually talk about that law. Section 1983 is the law that permits state officials and, in certain circumstances, private individuals implementing state programs to be sued in federal court if they deprive someone of any rights, privileges, or immunities secured by the Constitution and laws. But going back to the Tavlevsky case, rather than litigating whether they did or didn't violate the laws protecting nursing home patients, the defendant, again, the Health and Hospital Corporation of Marion County, is asking the Supreme Court to strip Medicaid recipients or patients of their ability to bring such lawsuits entirely. So think about what this means. This means that there's really no way to enforce the regulations pertaining to that federal funding that is given to the states to administer for their Medicaid programs, right? And the federal, government can actually go after the state if they're not using the money properly or if they're not abiding or complying with those regulations. But what would the end goal be? Taking federal funding away from those states, which would only exacerbate the problem and take important Medicaid funds away from low-income individuals within the state. So it's a little bit of a mess, and I'll get to the details in a moment, but it does appear that this pro-corporate conservative Supreme Court is poised to side with the defendants here.
Okay, so let me break down a number of things here. First, let's start with the Supreme Court. So I hate activist judges, and you may think, wait a minute, I've heard conservatives say that the liberal justices are activists. Nonsense. It's actually not nonsense, to be fair to them, right? In the past, liberal justices have been activists, and if you watch the Young Turks regularly, you know I'm actually fairly conservative on judicial issues. I don't even think Roe was decided correctly. I think Roe's great law, but the justices shouldn't have done that. So in this case, are the justices being conservative if they do what Anna has suggested here? No, it is not the conservative position at all. They're being activists. And they're saying, yeah, there's 50 years of precedent, let alone over 100 years of precedent on the issue of state versus federal that is at the core of this case. But we don't care about precedent at all. We don't care what happened before. This case is not close, guys. I'm telling you, judicially, I'm pretty conservative. This is not at all conservative. This is right-wing judges going, we don't care about judicial philosophy. Right. We don't care. We just want the Republicans to win. We want to end Medicaid, if they go in that direction. Remember, they haven't ruled yet, but there's some strong evidence to suggest that they're certainly considering it. Okay, now let's talk about the impact on Medicaid, as Anna alluded to, right? So number one, if people sue, then there's a good way to get redress, and then those states are worried about losing money, so they actually do follow the rules in the current system. Republicans don't want them to follow the rules. They want them to discriminate on Medicaid and hopefully destroy Medicaid, right? So now if the justices overturn the current system, what would have to happen is the federal government would have to come in and go, okay, you're doing it wrong. So either we're gonna cut all of your Medicaid funding to punish you, but wait a minute, that defeats the whole point. That means that everybody in that state isn't gonna get Medicaid. The Republicans are very happy. They're like, oh good, we crush the poor even more and we'll give more to the rich, right? So that's a terrible outcome. If they cut Medicaid a little bit to punish them, well, here's an example that Vox used that I thought actually was an excellent example. What's the first thing Florida's gonna do? They're gonna say, oh, you know what? We don't think that trans citizens should get any Medicaid at all, because we're worried that they're gonna use it for hormone therapy, whatever they're gonna make up. But they're gonna strip them of all of their Medicaid privileges. By the way, That's barely a hypothetical. It's almost guaranteed that they'll do that. And then they'll expand it to everyone who's in the LGBTQ community. They'll deny people who are gay of being able to get Medicaid, et cetera. Guaranteed, lock it in, write it down in stone. If the Supreme Court rules this way, DeSantis and almost all other red states will begin to do this, okay? So once they do that, and the federal government, if it is held by a Democrat the presidency, will then say, okay, we're gonna cut part of your Medicaid to punish you for applying it wrong, right? And you say, great, before we were denying just trans people. Now that you cut part of my Medicaid, I don't have the money for gay people either. Or hey, look at that, I don't have the money for black people. I don't have the money for poor people, which poor people is the whole point of Medicaid, is to make sure they don't die in the streets, right? So this will definitely allow Republicans to gut Medicaid and maybe even completely end it. And did they ever vote on it? No, and that's why I hate activist judges. The Supreme Court has been ruling in favor of corporations and robbing us of our democracy for over 50 years now. And here comes the same conservative activist judges, not conservative judicially, conservative politically, to come in and rob us of our rights without a single goddamn vote again.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And they have no problem breaking with established precedent or anything like that. And remember, the main goal here is to gut Medicaid. And when the Affordable Care Act was passed and it would actually enhance the amount of federal money that could go to states for Medicaid, Republican governors rejected it. They decided, no, we'll just allow our low-income constituents to suffer with no health care coverage, just to make a point about how we're rejecting this federal money for Medicaid. Okay, so with that said, let's talk about why I'm arguing that it appears the Supreme Court is poised to side with the defendants here. It's not simply because they're pro-corporate conservative judges. It's because of some signs, some signals we've seen from them in the not so distant past. So let's talk about some of the other cases that have been involved in this and how Supreme Court justices have kind of commented on it. So alarmingly for Medicaid beneficiaries, 3 current justices, Chief Justice John Roberts and Justices Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito, joined Antonin Scalia's opinion in Armstrong v. Exceptional Child Center, that was in 2015, which argued that the modern jurisprudence permitting Medicaid beneficiaries to sue does not generally apply to contracts between a private party and the government. So let me give you a little more of that, and then we can kind of decode what the argument is here. There is a little bit of hope. So Armstrong was not a Section 1983 case, right? Remember, Section 1983 is that Reconstruction era law that would allow for these Medicaid recipients to sue in federal court, right? Now let me continue. So it's unclear if the justices who joined Scalia's opinion in Armstrong intended to cut off suits filed under the Reconstruction era law. Okay, so what do I mean by Reconstruction era law? And what was the whole point of Section 1871? So in the Civil Rights Act of 1871, Congress created such a trigger, a broadly applicable private right of action for individuals who have had a federal right violated by the state. Okay, so that's like the gist of what the law is. And the argument here is, well, it's a contract entered between the federal government and the state. And so since it's between the federal government and the state, the private citizen doesn't have the right to sue in federal court over the state breaking the contract.
Okay, that actually is by far the most important part. It's even more important than the fact that this would destroy Medicaid. How could it be more important than that? Because then the states can do whatever the hell they want and the federal government can't do anything about it. If you take away Section 1983, we're back to Jim Crow years. Whether it's the South or anywhere else, they could just massively start discriminating, and there's not a goddamn thing the federal government can do about it.
Right.
And so the Supreme Court, well, we're gonna see. We're gonna see how radical they are. And by the way, on the Medicaid issue, if you got a Democratic president, you're in that conundrum that we talked about earlier. If you cut the Medicaid, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you do nothing, by the way, well, then you're gonna let the Republicans just rewrite any part of the Medicaid that you like. But what if it's a Republican president? Well, the Republican president is going to say to the states, yeah, gut it, destroy Medicaid, and I won't do anything about it. Okay, well then there goes Medicaid. And one of our members just wrote, and I love our members, and he explained, yeah, Mitch McConnell's been, now that they have the Supreme Court, they're hurry up and trying to destroy every part of the government that actually helps individuals, Social Security, Medicare, et cetera, right? And that's exactly right. And so the final piece of this is, like I said, if they get rid of that section 1983, we're back to the worst period in American history where the states' rights guys will use that as an excuse to discriminate against anybody and everybody that likely isn't white or straight.
Yeah, I mean, and more importantly, the one thing that's clear about the Supreme Court the conservative Supreme Court justices is how much they despise the administrative state, how much they despise social spending programs, and the whole reason why the Federalist Society chose them on their list as potential Supreme Court nominees is because they would dismantle the administrative state.
Yeah, and guys, to understand why that's so important, why that's part of an enormous part of corporate rule. So we say Federalist Society picks these judges because that's the organization they go through, and they just literally hand it to Trump and the other Republican presidents, and then they go, yes, sir, of course, sir, and they do what the Federalist Society tells them. But who is the Federalist Society? All the Federalist Society is a front group for corporate rule.
Yep.
So it's corporations that fund Federalist Society, and then they tell them, hey, you're to pick the most brutally pro-corporate judges and make them Supreme Court justices. We've told you this many times. Both Kavanaugh and Gorsuch ruled in cases where they said corporations are allowed to kill their employees and have no consequences. That is unbelievable. They're the most awful, horrific judges in the whole country, and that's why they were picked.
Yeah, and
that's
by the way,
specifically why they were picked.
What Jake is saying isn't even hyperbole. The case of the truck driver who was told to continue working during a winter storm after his truck broke down or something like that?
His truck broke down on the side of the road. He's asking for permission to go home, and they said permission denied. He said, I'm freezing to death. I think I have frostbite, which by the way, he did have frostbite. If I stay out here, I'm going to die. And they said, stay out there and die if you have to. You're not to drive that truck because it might hurt the wheel of the truck and cost us a couple of dollars.
Yep.
So when they did fire him because he drove home and didn't die, but he did have frostbite. Gorsuch was the only judge out of all the judges that saw through all the different layers that it went through that said, yes, he should have stayed out there and died.
Insane.
And so
that's who they are, though.
That's why they picked him. That's why they picked him. So when they get rid of the quote unquote administrative state, what are the two things that happens? That means you're allowed to deregulate all the corporations. So that means there's no cops on Wall Street. There's no cops overlooking corporations. So corporations will then go about killing us more systematically. And like for example, health insurance companies cause the death of 45,000 Americans every single year. Oh, you didn't pay enough. You're dead, okay? You don't have insurance, you die in the streets. Now, if you cut Medicaid, a lot more people are gonna die in the streets. And why are they doing it? So you force them into private insurance. So now a lot more won't be able to afford private insurance, but we'll make an extra couple of dollars from the people that we squeeze while all the rest die. And Gorsuch and Kavanaugh will be like, yes! And let alone Alito, Thomas, et cetera. So guys, this is barbaric corporate rule. And the Supreme Court is their #1 weapon in doing that. Look, I wrote about a giant chapter in this in my book. On that alone, justicescomingbook.com. It's coming in about September or so. But these guys took over our government and handed it over to corporations. The deregulation and of course, if you can't get government help, you're gonna be more indentured servants of corporations. And that's exactly what they want. This is as extreme a case as it gets.
Yep.
Except one other Supreme Court case they're considering, which would allow the states' legislatures just to decide who won elections, no matter who they vote, the people voted for. Those two cases, if they go in the activist direction, we're totally screwed. Democracy's gone, and we live under the most brutal corporate rule you'll ever see in your life.
All right, we're gonna take a quick break. When we come back, Obama keeps getting heckled as he rallies for Democratic candidates across the country. We'll also talk a little bit about child labor and just how many companies keep getting caught breaking child labor laws. That and more coming right up.
All right, guys, two things, programming notes I want to tell you about. You know, we're doing Food for Thought trivia. 100 of you are going to get $100 in free food. That's tomorrow, so make sure you become a member today, because only members can participate. And ask any member. Everybody's winning them like crazy. So, I mean, basically, you sign up for membership, and you've got an excellent shot at winning this thing. It pays for membership and then some. So check that out. tyt.com/join. If you're on YouTube, the join button below. You know that. Second thing is midterms. That's on Tuesday. It's right around the corner, a couple of days from now. So I hate that picture of me. That's okay. Me, Anna, Nina Turner, Rashad Ritchie, David Schuster, Jared Jackson, Jessica Burbank, John Iderlo, Michael Schur. All my rowdy friends are there on Tuesday night, let alone one potential surprise guest that is quite rowdy. I'll save that one for a little bit later, okay? Now let's go to our members. So don't miss any part of our midterm election coverage. The Republicans are already saying, "Oh, you're going to do a meltdown." God, they're never going to let 2016 go. Come on, yeah. We'll be honest with you guys. And if the Democrats lose, yeah, we'll rip into them. So I don't care if you're a Democrat, Republican. You just have to be sane to understand that we're telling you the truth instead of the lies that either mainstream media tells you. Democratic leadership are geniuses. They're so good at winning elections. Progressives can't win any elections. Only beloved corporate Democrats can, really? Well, they're getting their asses handed to them right now, it looks like, okay? And then the right-wing media with their insanity. And so you listen to right-wing media, you should have your head examined. All right, Dragonfire Mathemagician X says, wow, Jenks here. Amazing, Anna is gorgeous as always. There we go. Well, here we go indeed. Gabby Merida said, did Jen get a haircut? He should tell John about this newfangled thing. Or not, actually. John's hair looks kind of great, long. Just not slicked back like the lamest member of a motorcycle gang.
God,
he's not
you
part
guys. He's not here to defend himself, so
let's beat him up more.
No.
I'm kidding. We don't do that.
By the way, I was on Damage Report today. He had the slick back hair, and he was wearing, he's swole Darola because he's been working out.
Oh,
and he was
nice compliment. Look at this.
Wearing the tight black shirt, he looked like a badass,
okay.
like from a motorcycle gang or something.
I'll take that over a good haircut any day. Okay, so Mother of Cats writes in, Anna, sadly this Medicaid story is only par for the course in USA 2022.
Yep.
You will have nothing and be happy. You will let corporations do whatever they want and you will be happy. This country is brutal to its citizens, 100% right. Starshine Dragon Song said, one of my adult children has a chronic health condition that makes it impossible for him to hold a job. If they do this, he loses his health care. His diagnosis already means he's probably going to die younger than he should, but if they succeed on this, he will most definitely have fewer years ahead of him. That is the brutality of corporate rule. It's not theoretical, it's not hypothetical. This system actually kills people. Jay Brown says, Jenks 100% right about this prediction. SCOTUS is definitely likely to strip these rights. At the moment they do, red states, Florida and Texas, will strip Medicaid from people there. Shortly after, other states will follow. This is devastating news. Unfortunately, it is. Louis Cipher says, I have extreme election anxiety. I'm on Social Security disability after having a stroke. I fear if Republicans gain control, my livelihood will be destroyed. Unfortunately, that is maybe true. All right, back on TYT, Cenk Uygur and Experian, and Derek Lopez. Derek just joined, so God bless, thank you, we appreciate it. He hit the button below the YouTube video. You guys can do it at tyt.com/join. All right, Casper, what's
Lopez,
next?
part of my family,
I thought about saying he's part of the Lopez family now.
Yeah, didn't take my husband's last name, but still, I am part of the Lopez clan, so. Good
Welcome.
to meet you, brother.
There you go, kind of literally. All right,
let's do it. Well, things are getting real rowdy when Obama speaks. Let's go right to it.
An economy that's very good for folks at the very top, but not always so good for ordinary people.
Like you, Obama. Why do you
communities where too many kids are you going to start? Are you going to start yelling? You know, you have to be polite and civil.
You have to be polite and civil. Obama keeps getting heckled as he travels across the country to attend rallies on behalf of Democratic candidates. In this particular case, he was in Arizona rallying on behalf of Senator Mark Kelly and Secretary of State Katie Hobbs, again in Arizona. Now, I think this is one example of the heckling where the person actually makes a point that you can follow along with, and there's even some truth to it. There were other examples that were laughable, including one heckler on October 30th who decided to blame Obama for pushing us closer to nuclear war because of what's currently going on between Russia and Ukraine. I mean, Obama's like not president right now, and also when Crimea was annexed by Russia, I gotta say, I think the Obama administration luckily showed important restraint. So that didn't make much sense. But this is what any in-person political event has turned into. Shouting matches, anger, nonsense. And I think what we're seeing with the repeated heckling of Obama is like a concerted effort by conservatives, because they film it, they post it on social media. That guy, Benny Thompson or something like that. I noticed that he's been regularly tweeting this stuff out immediately. The video we showed you is from Turning Point USA. It's just, it's all a big game to them. It's hilarious.
So look, when Democratic voters, but not even just Democrats, but just a lot of independents, et cetera, showed up in Republican town halls when they were looking to kill Obamacare when Trump first won, the Republicans were flummoxed by it. And they were like, what? They just didn't see it coming because they didn't realize that people actually use Obamacare, and if they don't have it, they're worried about their family and they're worried about their health, et cetera, right? And you know what the line of attack was against those protesters? They're like, oh, they must be fake. Now they didn't have any evidence of that at all. But why did they assume that they were fake? Because that's what the right wing does every time. Okay, so when they were originally protesting Obamacare, when Obama was trying to pass it, the Koch brothers would send buses to pick up protesters, grassroots protesters, Tea Party guys, and then drive them over. They'd feed them, they'd give them food, they would hand them signs. It was all fake, it was all fake. Okay, this is even more fake because these are all staged, right? This is not even taking like grassroots dudes who are mad at banks and then redirecting them to be mad at healthcare, right? So in this case, every one of these guys is a total fraud. Most of them are these fake leftists and pretending that the Democrats are pro-war and the Republicans are peace-loving anti-war guys.
So peace-loving.
And the reason they're doing that is because in their stupid heads, and who knows, maybe it'll work with a tiny fraction of people, they think, oh, we'll convince the dumbest people in the Democratic Party that the Republicans are nice and don't want war and they love peace so much. And it's really Obama and AOC and Bernie that's the problem. They're the war hawks. And so they're trying to peel off that piece of the electorate. That's what the strategy is. Now, the way Obama responded, I didn't love at all. So I'll get back to that in a second.
Oh yeah, I know, because you used the word civil especially. That's why I kept that in the clip. But before we get to that, I didn't think there was gonna be a lot to say about this, but you brought up a lot of interesting points that I wanna reply to. So while I agree that specifically going after someone like Bernie Sanders as being pro-war is ridiculous, I have noticed that the Democratic Party has taken on elements of the Bush administration that made me despise the Bush administration. I became politicized during the Bush administration as he and all his cronies were planning to do the preemptive war in Iraq. And I just remember everyone banging the war drums, and the only people who were pushing back were in the Democratic Party. Now, I would have liked to see more of them, but the only pushback was from Democrats. Okay, now fast forward to 2020, when you have a massive group of never Trump Republicans, namely those from the Bush era, kind of going along with the Democratic Party because they hate Trump so much. I think the Democratic Party in a lot of ways has moved to the right on certain issues. I think a good example is the insane freak out and reaction to the progressive letter asking Biden to hey, we're not saying pull aid away from Ukraine, but we should also try to, push for diplomacy and peace negotiations. The fact that the Democratic Party freaked out about that the way they did, and then the weak behavior from the Progressive Caucus, pulling that letter, retracting it, it's just, I don't know, there's this weird realignment happening. I'm not saying at all that Republicans are anti-war. A lot of the actions that we hated under Obama were expanded under Trump, foreign policy-wise, including drone strikes. So I'm not buying the GOP talking point that they're anti-war at all. But I do think there is a problem with the Democratic Party beating war drums and not thinking a little more carefully about, hey, maybe we shouldn't increase tensions with China. Maybe we should question whether or not sending more and more military weaponry to Ukraine is helping to bolster the possibility of peace negotiations.
No, but okay, look, so Anna, all those things are correct to the point of being obvious. But what I can't stand and don't want to feed into here is the BS political trick that's being played. If you say, for example, you say progressive leadership shouldn't have crumbled on that letter. Well, I mean, progressive leadership is a joke, total utter joke. The only person weaker in the country than Nancy Pelosi is Pramila Jayapal, who's just constantly like, oh, I'm sorry, I'll do whatever leadership says. Get out of here, man. And then they want us to, oh yeah, well, you guys should kiss their ass, okay? No, hard no, okay? So now the Democrats, are they, a lot of them warmongers? Of course they are. Joe Biden and John Kerry and Hillary Clinton all voted for the Iraq war, okay? And they're craven. And why did Pelosi go to Taiwan? To needlessly start conflict so defense contractors can make more money, okay? But that the fake left doesn't just say that. If they said that, we obviously agree. I just told you that, right? But then they pretend that Republicans are better at this, that Republicans are anti-war. Total, massive, complete lie. And they lie on purpose for money because they're grifters. The Republican Party is awful on war, awful. You can name 1 or 2 times that, hey, Matt Gaetz said, hey, you need congressional authorization before war. Great, look, when it's real, I'm happy to give him credit. If a big portion of the Republican Party wants to come over to be anti-war, I would love it, okay? But it's a mirage that hasn't happened at all. The Republicans are the ones that started every war. Then Trump tripled the number of drone attacks, yet you never hear that from the fake left.
And stopped reporting on the number of civilian casualties as a result of those
course, he said, let's kill their family members, and he did kill their family members. Yeah. And these guys pretended Trump's pro-peace guys. Last 2 things on that, and then we'll get back to Obama. Trump tried to start 2 gigantic wars in the Middle East. By killing the top military leader in Iran, he was hoping that would start a conflict that actually swallowed up the entire Middle East in a gigantic war. And moving the embassy, the US embassy in Israel from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem was another attempt to start a war. Now, did Trump know that? He's an idiot. I don't know what he heard, what he believed, or who bribed him. Okay, well, I do know Sheldon Adelson is part of the people who bribed him to move the embassy. But the people who orchestrated that wanted a giant war in the Middle East so oil companies, defense contractors, and banks could make more money. So when the fake left liars pretend that the Republicans are angels, you have to know what you're getting into. So you criticize the Democratic Party, I love it, I'm here for it. I've been doing it for 20 years. You pretend the Republicans are innocent, you're a goddamn liar.
One other thing I want to just quickly mention about Trump's foreign policy. Remember, he was so obsessed with starting a war with Iran that after he tore up the Iran nuclear deal, he had ordered a missile strike against Iran and luckily last second called it off. Think about what a disaster that would have been. I mean, he had already assassinated Qasem Soleimani, the top general in Iran. That alone could have sparked a full out hot war with Iran. Luckily it didn't. But yeah, I mean, everything that you're saying is absolutely correct. I want to get to Obama's be civil comment because I knew that would set you off.
Yeah, so look, the whole way that he handled it, and it goes on, is he keeps asking for a guy who's an purposeful agitator who's trying to ruin the rally to be civil and polite, as if he's talking to a normal person. Yep. Like, oh, it's a citizen showed up. And you know Obama loves Republicans. Obama's like, this is probably a holy, wonderful, saintly Republican. He's just forgetting to be civil. If I tell him to be civil, like when I was in charge, the Republicans were very civil. We would make all sorts of deals that helped corporate America, and we both, we high-fived over it. We would say bipartisanship. The corporate media would kiss all of our asses. They declared me a saint. So I guess this is my beloved friend here, who's a Republican, who just got a little uncivil. No, you're not getting it. And the fact that you're not getting it is hurting the country. The Republicans are not good guys. They're not good guys. They're your goddamn opponents. If you're on the campaign trail and you're trying to help Democrats, you should make that clear. But Obama doesn't. I know, I'm the only one. Everyone else in media is like, Obama, he's on the campaign trail. It's gonna make such a big difference. Is it? Why? Have you heard anything that Obama has said that is resonating with voters,
yes.
That's sticking with voters?
There is one thing.
Really? I'm very curious what it is.
I think you might have been out when we covered this story, but so he was giving a speech, I forget which state he was in specifically, but he was talking about how Republicans have this plan to gut Social Security, which is absolutely accurate. They're planning on holding the debt ceiling hostage after they take over the House to force Democrats and the Biden administration to agree to privatizing Social Security in return for lifting the debt ceiling.
Yeah, so that one doesn't hurt his corporate friends, so he's willing to do that. But I'll take it.
Yeah.
I'll take it.
And it was powerful.
And by the way, the Biden administration turned around. I tweeted about this when I was out. Biden administration finally figured out, hey, we should attack on Social Security and Medicare, and they started running ads on that. And I said, good, yeah. That's positive, right? But again, it's super safe. And also remember that Obama is the one who wanted to cut Social Security. I'm keeping it real.
Yep,
he offered it to Mitch McConnell. He wanted to do the grand bargain, okay? And everybody in media reported that it's true. And then, but if I say it, they'll say, oh, that's no. Obama's a saint. Obama's a saint. He would never do that. That's not true. He offered to cut Social Security. He would have done exactly what the Republicans are saying. And so do you get this sense, do we look pro-Democrat to you guys? No, we're fair and honest about the faults of both parties. But these guys that are interrupting the rallies are obvious frauds. And to my overall point about Obama, you have to say Democrats are good. It just is politics, forget policy. You're trying to win an election. In order for you to be helpful, you have to say Democrats are good guys and Republicans are bad guys, okay? He does it on Social Security, and good point, Anna. On everything else, oh, my beloved Republican friends, they're so wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. I just happen to disagree with them on this. Meanwhile, the Republicans are ripping Democrats' face off. We're gonna see later in the show, they're running ads about Democrats are anti-white racist. Democrats are gonna come after your children, right? Meanwhile, Obama's playing patty cakes. Oh, please be civil, please be civil. Now, you don't get it, man. All these guys, him, Biden, every one of them, Pelosi, they all love Republicans and they cannot get it through their thick head that the fascists are coming. The fascists are coming, they're within inches of power. But he's fine in his mansion in Nantucket or wherever, the Martha's Vineyard, wherever he is.
Well, we are gonna take a brief break. When we come back, we'll finally get to that child labor story that I was referring to, and we'll talk about the race baiters in the right wing. Stephen Miller's latest political ad is full of disgusting and vicious lies. We'll debunk all of them coming right up.
Back on the social break here, let me go to the YouTube super chat. Some folks have been wonderfully generous, including Happy Warrior. He says, thank you, TYT. Thank you for helping Nina Turner amplify her message. Unbossed is fantastic. You all are amazing. The progressive movement and message doesn't deserve such amazing advocates. Thank you. So thank you for saying that. We appreciate it. Look, honestly, and I tell you guys this all the time, and the only love we get is from you guys. Everyone else is ego, ego, ego. These guys are telling the truth. We hate them for telling the truth. You should be kissing our ass instead, whether it's left-wing so-called leaders, whatever the hell they are, the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, mainstream media. They all despise us for telling things that are obviously true, obviously. So thank you for saying the wonderful things that you do. It keeps us going. I talked to an Uber driver in New York, and we were talking about politicians. He's like, well, they're all obviously corrupt. Right? And I say that in a room full of media in New York, and they're like, They were outraged. I'm like, literally every American thinks that, except you sons of bitches who take $6 billion from politicians every year because of money in politics. They do the ads on where? Media. So media lies for corrupt politicians. Anyway, Sally Thompson says, turned 73 today. My Jake brought me my 2-strong coffee. We have money and aspiration. Later we'll have Blue Apron. Now with TYT and young friends. Let's keep fighting. I still have tread on my tires. Vote, love to all. Sally, I love you. So it's so great to hear from you. Happy birthday, by the way, okay? And thank you for participating in all of those things. And guys, don't get me wrong, you gotta vote because the fascists are coming. And so I hate that the Democrats prop up fascists and they go, hey, you gotta vote against the fascists. But it is true, and you can't let the fascists win. So please vote, especially for secretaries of state in your state. That is the most important, those are the most important elections. Otherwise, they'll just be able to steal democracy. Jonah Morton writes in, opened up my mailbox and was told, we know when you vote on Tuesday. It felt like or else. By the way, I already voted. Look, there's a million tricks. You know, the Republicans have been doing this not recently, but forever, where they'll say, remember everybody, Republicans vote on Tuesday, Democrats vote on Wednesday. It's like one of the oldest tricks that they have. And people believe it. So unfortunately, some percentage of people believe it, and nobody ever regulates it. Carl Dergler says, just another example of demonstrating that human needs shouldn't be capitalized. But yeah, that's what we do in America, and that's why it's brutal. Progressive Canuck writes in, over 50,000 workers in the education system, not teachers, are bargaining as a union in Ontario, Canada, and the provincial government is passing legislation to make it against the law to strike, which goes against Canada's Charter of Rights. Hashtag I stand with Coop. So of course you're right, and I was on a podcast, Canada Land, about Canada just last week.
Oh, look at you, you fancy.
I don't know if I'm fancy, but I said, look, 2 warnings. One, yes, American fascism is creeping over the border to Canada, so you have to be careful. But the second warning is build a wall, because if Trump wins, which he's favored to do now, we're coming. Back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. Also, April Malone. April, thank you for signing up. We appreciate it. All right, Anna.
I want to talk a little bit about child labor in America because there are a lot of companies breaking laws, and we're also learning that there are a lot of young people who are working because they have to. Dunkin Donuts will have to pay a $145,000 settlement for 1,200 child labor law violations. Let me just repeat that again. 1,200 child labor law violations in Massachusetts specifically, and this is according to an announcement that was recently made by the state's attorney general. Now, what were the violations? What were they up to? Well, according to the press release, violations included failing to obtain a work permit for minor workers, failing to supervise minors past 8 p.m., employing a 16 or 17-year-old to work before 6 a.m. or after 10 p.m., employing a minor under the age of 18 for more than 9 hours in a single workday, and employing a minor under 16 before 6:30 a.m. or after 7 p.m., and for more than 8 hours in a single workday. You see, minors still have to do this thing called go to school. And so Massachusetts adds on to the current federal child labor laws to make them a little more robust in their state. And clearly, as you can tell, based on the settlement, Dunkin Donuts had violated those state regulations. So under Massachusetts state law, minors may not work more than 9 hours per day, or 48 hours per week. Children ages 14 and 15 may not work later than 7 p.m. and children ages 16 and 17 can't work later than 10 p.m. on school nights or later than midnight on non-school nights. Now, the investigation revealed more than 1,200 violations involving more than 50 employees across 14 stores in the last year and a half. In fact, this investigation ended up getting launched after a minor employee filed a complaint with the Attorney General's office in Massachusetts and said that they were working more than 10 hours a day. So that's what sparked the investigation. Luckily, the Attorney General did her job, investigated this, and found, yes, there were violations. This year, other Dunkin Donuts franchisees in Massachusetts have been issued citations from the AG's office for child labor violations, wage and hour law violations, and not allowing employees to earn or use sick leave. And this is an ongoing issue, guys. This isn't a one-time thing. This isn't an isolated event. For instance, in 2020, Chipotle was cited for more than 13,000 violations and was ordered to pay $1.8 million in their settlement. In states with Republican legislatures, there are currently efforts to even further weaken child labor laws if they haven't done so already. So just to give you an example of something that was done in 2011, probably got no attention. In 2011, Wisconsin eliminated limits on the number of hours and days that minors aged 16 to 17 could work, and even replaced the phrase child labor with a nice euphemism, employment of minors, in 2017. I thought it was just the left that was interested in sanitizing things and using euphemisms. So it looks like the right wing engages in that quite a bit themselves. Now, the most recent changes have attracted support from a number of powerful service industry lobbies, of course, such as the Wisconsin Restaurant Association, who say it will help to solve businesses' staffing issues and teach teenagers a healthy work ethic. And final thing I'll say, Cenk, I'll give you the numbers in a little bit, but there's an ever-growing percentage of high school students who drop out of high school to enter the workforce because their families need the income, meaning their parents need the income. In some cases, the minimum wages that they're earning accounts for as much as a quarter of the annual income in that household. It's insane.
Yeah, so first let me tell you what this isn't, and then I'll tell you what this is. So what it isn't is 1955. So what the Republicans do every time when they talk about issues like this is, oh, look, we're just bringing in Johnny and Sally to work in the summer and teach them the work ethic. And they're gonna work with their mom and dad, and they're gonna be busboys at their local diner that the mom and dad are running. And hey, that's great, and they're gonna get that experience that they need, etc. No, that's just mythology, man. And what this isn't is 16, 17-year-olds working a summer job under the normal rules. They're violating the normal rules here, the employers, right? What this is companies going, I pay the kids a lot less, they got no experience, and if I have them work before 6 in the morning, after 10 o'clock at night, I have them work more and more hours, and I replace my actual workers with kids who are desperate for money, either for themselves or to help with the family. Well, I drive the kids into the mines, I make more money. I keep my costs low, and then I'll trick the American people with this mom and pop BS that we throw out there. And the Republicans will sell it, Democrats won't do anything, and we'll have corporate rule now extend to 14-year-olds and have them work their ass off, just like we got their dad and their mom to work their ass off.
Right, no, that's exactly right. And what's even scarier is how we already know that a household with adults earning minimum wage, even if they're working full time, they're not bringing in enough money to simply live. You're not making enough money to pay your rent. You're not making enough money to put food on the table for your family. So when families get desperate, they end up relying on their teenage children to bring in income. And so this is a piece that was actually written in 2015. And I would venture to say that the problem that I'm about to describe has only gotten worse. But back in 2015, there was actually a really great piece written in the Washington Post about the ever-growing percentage of high school students who drop out of high school just to work because their families depend on it. So using data from the 2008-2012 American Community Survey, researchers at the Urban Institute found that nearly a third of the 563,000 teenage dropouts left school to work. These 16 to 18-year-olds were disproportionately male and Hispanic and ended their education either at the beginning of high school or nearing the end. Roughly 75% of them are native-born Americans. Now let's get to how much their families rely on them for their income. 6 out of 10 of the teenagers identified in the study earned less than $10,000 a year working in restaurants, on construction sites, cleaning buildings, among other things. A third of the kids contribute more than 20% of the total annual income of their households. A tenth contributed more than 50%, according to this study. Again, it was done by the Urban Institute. I would like to see an updated version of this study because I'm curious. I mean, LAUSD right now is having trouble with enrollment. A bunch of students never came back when they reopened schools. And I'm scared that those students just left school permanently, dropped out to go work.
Yeah, well, obviously, according to the numbers, a lot of them did. And so, look, guys, one more time. Massachusetts is not going after any small business owners. And anytime you hear a Republican or a right-winger say small business, substitute the word giant multinational corporations instead, okay? Or the words. And so in this case, who's Massachusetts going after? Only giant companies, Dunkin Donuts, Chipotle, Wendy's, etc. They're all using this systematically to make sure their costs are lower. This is only about corporate rule. That's the only thing this is about. And so, by the way, give credit to Democrats in Massachusetts that are actually going after these giant corporations abusing kids.
And give credit to that teenage Dunkin Donuts worker who had the wherewithal to report how he or she was being treated at Dunkin Donuts, which sparked the investigation.
100%. And by the way, so then Republicans will say, can you believe what the Democrats are doing to our kids in the schools? They're teaching them that gay people exist. They shouldn't do that at all. They're doing, terrible what they're doing to our kids. Meanwhile, they're like, let's send the kids back into the mines, okay? And make sure they work at 5 in the morning and at 11 at night, okay? And by the way, that's if they didn't get murdered by guns that we love so much in their mass shootings in school. And unsurprisingly, by the way, another poll shows 53% of young people in this country say they don't feel represented by Congress at all.
Because they're not.
Because they're not, of course they're not. The only thing that Congress ever represents, whether they're Republicans or Democrats, good cop, bad cop, is corporate interests, because those are their donors. You think they're listening to 16-year-olds that are barely surviving by working at Wendy's at 5 in the morning? They're not listening to that. So, and 70% of them also say that their generation is underrepresented in Congress. And again, underrepresented undersells it. You have almost no representation.
Well, let's move on to something that's just as infuriating. An insane ad that was put together by, I believe it was Stephen Miller. Yes, Stephen Miller. Let's go.
When did racism against white people become okay? Joe Biden put white people last in line for COVID relief funds. Kamala Harris said disaster aid should go to non-white citizens first. Liberal politicians block access to medicine based on skin color. Progressive corporations, airlines, universities all openly discriminate against white Americans. Racism is always wrong. The left's anti-white bigotry must stop. We are all entitled to equal treatment under law. America First Legal paid for this ad.
America First Legal airing that insane ad in parts of Georgia and Florida. Stephen Miller, one of Trump's advisors and a well-known white supremacist, is behind this particular ad, which if you know anything about Stephen Miller, it's the most unsurprising thing in the world. But of course, it is full of lies. We like to provide the receipts, so we'll go ahead and debunk, decode everything that's in there. Before we do though, I wanna give you an opportunity to just knee-jerk reaction to that ad, Cenk.
Yeah, just 3 quick things. One is none of it is true, but you need a press that is willing to be honest and say these things are true and these things are not true. If you hear this ad, you understand that you're listening to a goddamn liar. So hey, I guess the Republicans have decided to lie to you on purpose. So that's reaction number 1. Reaction number 2 is I've never seen an ad that stokes racial fear and racial hatred as much as that ad does, all with lies. And then third thing I realize is like all the ads now are relatively diverse, right? So whether it's an ad for Coke or Nike or most political ads, even the Republicans will put in actors who are black or Asian, et cetera, pretending that those groups support them. That ad was all white, 100% white.
Yeah.
Obviously because of the topic, right? But the second thing that it's showing you is white people, the Republican Party is for you and you only. And so it's as bad as it gets. And will it get the kind of coverage we're giving it here? Overall, will people realize, hey, if I see this ad, I understand that the Republicans are the racist lying party? No, they won't get that at all. Tons and tons of people will believe this ad.
Yeah, I mean, look, I remember anytime we covered a story involving police brutality or a story involving, let's say, a black family getting their home appraised for far less if the appraiser knew that they were black versus getting appraised for far more if the appraiser had no idea and thought the owners were white. Anytime we would cover those stories, right wing would get vicious about it and they would accuse us of race baiting when we're just reporting the news. Like, this is what is happening in the country. This is what you should know about. No, but they project every time they speak because race baiting is what they do. This is race baiting and it's based on complete lies. So let's go through each lie one by one. So the first part of the ad says Biden's restaurant relief program excludes white male owners. And then they have this poor guy, poor schlep, he's being denied, obviously. He's not getting any of that relief program money, right? Except, as we know, based on where all the small business money went to during COVID, a lot of wealthy white business owners got that money, but it doesn't matter, right? Like, this is a lie. So let's tell you what actually happened. So they cite an article from Daily Wire, which was written in May of 2021. On October 8th of 2021, Joe Biden did discuss potentially prioritizing COVID aid to small businesses owned by people of color and women. But again, they're excluding important context, okay? This is what Biden actually said, the exact statement. Our focus will be on small businesses on Main Street that aren't wealthy and well-connected, that are facing real economic hardships through no fault of their own. Our priority will be Black, Latino, Asian, and Native American-owned small businesses, women-owned businesses, and finally, having equal access to resources needed to reopen and build. So I think the full context is important. It wasn't Biden saying like, no, we're not gonna offer any aid to white business owners.
Yeah, okay, so two things about that.
Yeah.
Remember the ad said it excludes all white male owners.
Right.
Excludes them completely. So first of all, that's 100% lie, and it's a lie on two fronts. As Anna pointed out, other than PPP, which actually went to, generally speaking, small to mid-sized companies, the first round of relief actually went to giant corporations.
Yes.
That are run almost exclusively by white males, right? Now there's some minorities in there, but not a lot, okay? So, but the idea that they were excluded is hilarious. They got the overwhelming percentage of the money. They got a lot more money than small business owners did. And then when you go to the small business programs, PPP, et cetera, we've looked at those rules 1,000 times. Can white people apply? Of course. Can males apply? Of course. Did whites and males apply? Did they get PPP? Yes, 100%. So, but it doesn't have to be true. It just has to be like, hey, Biden said half a sentence that could be misinterpreted. Good enough, let's go.
Yeah, then that's exactly what they did. And look, the reason why Biden wanted to prioritize the specific small businesses that he was referring to there is for good reason. According to data from the National Bureau of Economic Research, African American businesses saw a 41% drop in business activity from February until April of 2020. Latino businesses saw a 32% drop, and Asian businesses dropped by 26%. Female-owned businesses saw a similarly disproportionate effect with 25% decrease in business activity. That is in contrast to a 17% decrease white business owners have faced.
But even so, Biden was just saying that rhetorically. This is what we say about Democrats all the time. They never mean anything anyway. So he didn't actually prioritize them in any way, shape, or form. I'm positive the PPP forms and every other aspect didn't even mention race. It wasn't like you could check, oh, I'm white male. Okay, you go to the bottom of the list. It has nothing to do with it. This whole thing is invented, including Biden's rhetoric about how he's gonna help blacks and women first. They never did that.
They never did that. Okay, now let's get to the second one, because actually before we get to the second lie, I need to give you some recent history, okay? So there was a devastating hurricane that took place in Florida, Hurricane Ian, if you can recall. I was on vacation when that happened, but I was following it very closely. The reason why I was following it closely is because it hit a place called Fort Myers, where me and my family visit regularly, almost every year. And it was completely devastated. And I was very happy to see how fast Biden was in responding to Ron DeSantis declaring a state of emergency and providing upward of $70 billion in federal funding meant to help Florida recover from that devastation. That's important to keep in mind. With that said, here's the second lie. They allege that Kamala Harris wanted disaster aid to go to non-white citizens first following Hurricane Ian. Not true at all. At all, not true at all. The assertion is also missing context. In reality, during a conversation on September 30th of this year, Harris was asked about climate justice generally and mentioned distributing resources equitably to help vulnerable populations, okay? So here's her exact comment. It is our lowest income communities and our communities of color that are most impacted by these extreme conditions and impacted by issues not of their own making. And so we have to address this in a way that is about giving resources based on equity, understanding that we need to fight for equality, but also equity. Not everyone starts out at the same place, and sometimes we have to take into account those disparities and do that work. I don't, so what did they want her to say? I believe that the federal money should further bolster the finances of the wealthiest people in the country. That's where I think the aid should go to first. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Stephen Miller genuinely thought that, okay?
So what she's saying is, hey, let's not leave behind poor people, generally speaking, and unfortunately, disproportionately minorities in this country, when things like this hit. So she's not saying, you know what, finally, poor people are ahead of white people. Wouldn't that be amazing in America? But if you're poor, it doesn't matter if you're white or black, you know that's never gonna happen, right?
Yeah.
So when she asks for a little bit of equity and equality for everyone concerned, they're like, how dare you?
By the
Rich
way,
white people should be first.
I wanna clarify something because this is important. When she made that statement, she wasn't even referring to Hurricane Ian either. She was just talking about the climate emergency generally, which does disproportionately impact the lives of low-income communities. We know that.
Yeah, and oftentimes they're the first to get wiped out. As if you remember the Hurricane Katrina, of course, in New Orleans.
Exactly.
It wiped out the poorest areas first that were disproportionately African American. And she's saying, don't leave those people behind. Let's go for equity and equality. They're like, how dare you say equality? That means you hate white people. White people should get something first. Now, they didn't say it like that in the ad. Instead, they lied in the ad.
That's exactly right. All right, let's do one more real quick. So the ad also has this portion that reads, whites may not be eligible for antibodies and antivirals while non-whites are. And they cite the Wall Street Journal on January 7th of 2022. Let's all recall when Ron DeSantis ensured that the rollout of the vaccines in his state went to his wealthy donors first before anyone else. Obviously that wasn't mentioned in the ad, but what was mentioned in the ad was in fact a lie. The group has taken some legal action on this claim. Earlier this year, America First Legal filed a lawsuit in the state of New York against a Department of Health guideline for COVID-19 treatment that stated non-white race or Hispanic Latino ethnicity should be considered a risk factor as long-standing systemic health and social inequities inequities have contributed to an increased risk of severe illness and death from COVID-19. It's just demonstrably true. It's just demonstrably true. But Stephen Miller took that and twisted it in a way that would stoke more hatred, more tensions, more of this divisive racial stuff in the country. On purpose, because that's what they do. Divide and conquer, divide and conquer. That's it.
So here, let me clarify this too. So contributed to a risk factor doesn't mean you only give it to people of color, okay? It never says that, as always. So let me give you an example that is removed from COVID at all. So I happen to get a skin disease that mainly affects Jewish people in the world. I happen to get it randomly, okay? Doesn't exclusively affect Jewish people, but it predominantly affects Jewish people. So being Jewish is a risk factor for that particular skin disease. So the government's saying, hey, remember that and take that into account because we don't want you to forget that it's more likely to affect those particular people.
Right.
It doesn't say Cenk Uygur, who isn't Jewish, shouldn't be treated. It doesn't say that at all. If it did, I'd be livid, right? It just says, remember that it's a risk factor and it is more likely to affect this group. And in the case of COVID, unfortunately, it's devastating, but for blacks and Latinos, it affected them more. It was a risk factor. By the way, later you could say that, hey, being a Republican was a risk factor because they're more likely to be dumbasses that didn't take the vaccine and are in much greater danger. And I would have told doctors, be careful. If you're seeing a Republican, you should pay more attention to them because they're more likely to be idiots who didn't take any precautions and have greatly endangered themselves. Okay, by the way, of course, they would be livid about that. Okay, but there are risk factors, but the ad itself saying like, oh, white people won't be able to be treated in hospitals. Of course, 100% fabrication.
The hospitals were like overwhelmed with Trump supporting patients who refused to like mask up and get the vaccine. Every surge, every single surge. Anyway. All right, so there it is. I mean, I don't know what good us debunking the ad will do. I don't know if any of the people who saw the ad are ever gonna come across this video, but this is how politics is done. You have the right wing engaging in the most vicious form of lies and deceptions, and then you have Democrats who just wanna play patty cakes and be civil. We gotta go to break, we're out of time. When we come back, a pretty explosive story involving how the LAPD helped provide cover for former CBS executive Les Moonves, who had been preying on people he was working with. We've got that story and more coming right up.
You're about to watch some behind the scenes footage of the Young Turks. Ooh. Now, these are partial videos. If you want to get all of them, you become a member, go to tyt.com/join, and you'll get all the behind the scenes of me, Anna, John, JR, a little bit reality show like, tyt.com/join, and enjoy this.
You know what you're seeing behind me? Jersey, hold. Watch me flip this camera. However I flip it. Do I flip it like this? No, I just took a picture. I'm bitzing right now.
What?
Behind the scenes.
Oh, okay. For members? I don't have my face on.
She doesn't have her face on, folks. Oh, that's JR's ass right there.
You can't take 5 minutes off, can you?
No, I can't, Johnny. Bye. I said it was live stream, but I was lying. It's not a live stream. It's just for members. Bitsy, this is my cat. You know what his name is? Kiki Cat.
Animals are innocent.
Control room and the insanity is obviously there.
Right now, as you can see, I'm directing or tech directing. I'm so happy to be here.
This is what like a Labor Day beard looks like for Cenk. Man, you're a Young Turks viewer if you recognize me like this.
Oh, thank you. You are the one person in my life I would love to meet.
What's going on, guys? This is a Bitsy or a BTS or behind the scenes with Hassan Piker, AKA Woke Bay.
Oh, hi, I didn't see you there.
I have finished my show, The Damage Report, and now I get into a really awkward time of the day.
When I'm sitting, the control room is right there. So I can see Bart.
This is the Pittsburgh office, by the way. Referred to often as the boiler room.
You see how it's ripped? Is it super unprofessional to wear that at a business meeting? Or am I like cool, rebel?
I just finished doing the power panel and I'm fired up.
What do you do for TYT?
Not a whole lot.
If you're frantically tweeting at us that something's broken, thank you, because I'm fixing it.
And thank you for being a TYT member.
Super last thing, because there's always got to be a super last thing. Oh, that was disastrous. This has been behind the scenes, behind the scenes.
Welcome to Indisputable. I'm your host, Dr. Rashad Richard. We got a lot happening today. But what do we do on this show? We tell the truth. You know why we tell the truth? Because the truth is simply indisputable.
Rashad, great to be here. Congratulations on the new show. And I gotta let everybody know that Rashad and I go way back.
Here's the pattern that we see in all of these Karen stories. They think they own stuff they do not own. Now, where does that come from? I don't know, maybe slavery. Maybe they think they should still own black people.
This is what happens when Karens weaponize the police.
When you're used to privilege, equality seems like oppression.
It hits you in a certain way when someone is holding you against your will, treating you like you're a criminal and you're an innocent person. This is something that black people face no matter where they are.
A stronger black economy lends itself to a stronger, greater economy. Don't think it's exclusive of you, it's inclusive of you.
What's your beef with critical race theory?
It adds more fuel to the fire of the racist tendencies that we already have.
We have a generation of problem solvers that can remedy the problem if they are properly taught what the problem is.
You know who created redlining in this country? It was a white liberal.
I don't give a damn who created it. If it's a racist policy, Shelley, here's what I don't know. I don't know. See, there you go filibustering, brother. You're scared of this truth, but you're gonna get it, though.
Climate is changing fundamentally, extremely, and non-linearly. It's becoming worse now. It's not when the levees burst that is the problem. It's in the anticipation of that.
So I hope every human being is safe. And by human beings, I do not include multinational corporations, especially the ones that started climate change in the first place.
What we're currently doing right now in cutting emissions is clearly not enough. There will be ramifications to what Trump is doing. I don't want people to suffer, but I feel like there's gonna be a lot of suffering because we have an imbecile as our leader.
Back on TYT, Jen Canano with you guys. I'm going to give a shout out to someone on Twitch who gifted 5 subs. Their handle is Anna, your hair looks great, dragon.
Thank you. I know, it's not gonna lie, it's my favorite handle. My hair does look great today, by the way.
Yeah, well, they agreed. That's why they gifted 5 subs. I don't know if that's why they gifted 5 subs, but thank you.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. All right, Casper, what's next?
All right, pretty disturbing story, and I wanna probably give you 2 warnings, starting with the first one. This is a difficult story, and I wanna give you a trigger warning in case, stories of sexual misconduct, details of sexual misconduct make you uneasy. With that said, let's get to this. A new report in the New York Attorney General a new report by New York Attorney General. Yeah, Attorney General. Why does that sound weird all of a sudden?
Yeah, I don't know why, but
okay. Yeah, let me start that again. A new report from the New York Attorney General, Letitia James, reveals the corruption and collusion between Les Moonves, a former CBS executive who was ousted after reports of sexual misconduct came out, and the Los Angeles Police Department, who essentially provided cover for him to prevent the story from getting out in the first place. The details of how they worked together back in 2017 and 18 to cover up sexual assault allegations against Moonves are damning, to say the least. Now, first, here's a reminder of the disgusting assault allegations he was accused of. But I do want to give you a warning that the details here are difficult to even talk about, and the description is graphic and contains details of sexual violence. Moonves' accuser, Phyllis Golden Gottlieb, who has since died, was a TV show development executive in the mid-1980s when she worked with Moonves at Lorimer Productions in Culver City. She told The Times that in a parking lot outside a restaurant, he forcibly grabbed her head and slammed it into his crotch, and then it ejaculated into her mouth. He was confronted with this. He immediately denied it, said the allegations were false, and the Los Angeles County prosecutors didn't bring charges against him because the statute of limitations had expired. Now, back to the report from Letitia James and how the LAPD was involved in all of this. The report comes 5 years after the LAPD captain tipped off CBS executives, telling them a woman had come to the department's Hollywood station to report that Moonves had allegedly assaulted her in the 1980s. Somebody walked in the station about a couple hours ago and made allegations against your boss regarding a sexual assault, the police captain said in a November 10th, 2017 voicemail message left for a CBS executive, according to the report. It's confidential, as you know, but call me. Now, over the next few months, the LAPD met in person with Moonves and secretly provided him and other CBS executives with status updates on the investigation. Helping him out, giving him the inside baseball, insider information he needed. They also gave Moonves details, personal details about the alleged accuser. Now, the captain slipped CBS a copy of the accuser's report, And top CBS executives then began investigating the victim's personal circumstances and that of her family, the report said. And this is very common. Harvey Weinstein did something very similar to his victims, where if he thought there was any possibility that they would report him to the police, or if they had already accused him publicly, he would have all of his Oppo researchers dig into these women's personal lives, and then he would tell them, look, we're gonna come out with this terrible information about you. We're gonna destroy your reputation. It was a form of intimidation to prevent these women from coming forward or to recant their stories. Now, apparently the police captain had such a chummy relationship with Moonves and CBS's executives that he had been part of Moonves' security detail for the Grammy Awards for several years. So he actually had a personal relationship here. Both sides wanted to downplay the seriousness of the woman's allegations, which came in the heat of the Me Too movement. CBS executives were assured by the captain, meaning the police captain, that LAPD implemented controls to prevent news of the police report from leaking to the press. Hopefully we can kill media from PD, then figure out what complainant number one wants, Moonves wrote the captain and a CBS assistant in one text message obtained by the Attorney General. And then 8 months later, turns out LAPD couldn't really help him because the public became aware of the allegations against Moonves. Then in July of 2018, there were allegations from 6 more women who said that Moonves assaulted or harassed them while they were working together. So I've got more details. This guy was so gross. And just one side note, remember Les Moonves was the CBS executives who just openly said, Donald Trump, bad for the country, great for our ratings. Right, yeah. That's who that guy was.
And he said, "Bring it on, Donald."
Yeah, and he did.
Yeah, well, Moonves knew a thing or two about that apparently. So look, 2 parts to the story. One is that when I was growing up, I didn't understand what cops were. I misunderstood. I thought they were here to protect us. Now I realize, no, they're here to protect the rich and powerful. Period. And so if you're still under that misimpression that they're here to protect you, God bless you. But look, if you're upper middle class, you're gonna be all right. You're gonna be all right. They generally come to help you. And if you're rich, you're set. They're basically your bodyguards that the rest of us all pay for, okay? So that's why this guy doesn't, he probably thought like this is the most obvious thing in the world. A poor, powerful person is being accused of something they probably did. I have to immediately help them. So, I mean, if they hadn't gotten caught with Ronan Farrow did a great story on Moonves. He had done it many, many times. They had at least 6 women on the record with very similar allegations. But if they hadn't found that all out, what would have happened? The cops in LA would have covered it up for Moonves. Moonves would have gotten away with it. And the poor woman who walked in thinking the cops were gonna help her didn't realize, no, the cops are not here to help you at all. So if you report someone rich and powerful doing something bad to you, very likely the cops will turn on you. And by the way, they then handed over her personal information so the CBS executives could figure out ways to smear her. So by going to the cops, she actively hurt herself.
And also prevent any personal damage that they might experience from, let's say, the stock of CBS going down after it's reported, right, that their executive is sexually assaulting and harassing people that he works with. And that's part of the investigation as well. So let's talk about that a little bit. First, let me just note that after word got out that Moonves had done this allegedly and that he had been fired, the CBS board fired Moonves September 9th of 2018. That day, the LAPD captain emailed Moonves underlining Ian Metros saying, quote, "I'm so sorry to hear this news, Ian. Sickens me. We worked so hard to try to avoid this day." The captain sent a note to Moonves 2 days later. "I'm deeply sorry that this happened. I will always stand with you. Buy and pledge my allegiance to you." It's so disgusting. It's absolutely, this guy victimized women that he was working with, and this now retired LAPD captain that was based in Hollywood isn't reaching out to the woman who was victimized brutally. reaching out to the perpetrator to say, I'm so sorry you got fired after we worked so hard to protect you. So who was this guy? Commander Corey Polka was his name. He's no longer with the LAPD. He was able to retire before facing any consequences. And he was the captain of the Hollywood station in 2017 and 2018. James's report also, by the way, exposed other shady dealings with CBS. The New York Attorney General's report contained other findings, including how CBS's former chief communications officer, Gil Schwartz, who has since died, sold more than 160,000 shares of CBS in June of 2018 as the company tried to contain the explosive allegations. Schwartz sold the stock with CBS's approval, netting more than 8.8 million, knowing that damaging information could come out, and it did a few weeks later.
Yeah, they knew and they cashed in on it.
Yeah.
So that cop might not have been able to save Moonves because he was such a serial predator. But he did at least save a couple of CBS executives millions of dollars as they were able to cash out before any of you found out. I'm gonna come back to the shareholders because that's the second large part of this story. But I just want to clarify a couple of things. First of all, the cop wrote the note to Ian Metros, who was Moonves' main underling, that he had communicated with earlier. They had coordinated, Moonves sent Metros to coordinate with the dirty cop. Now I say dirty cop, but LAPD is now pretending to be outraged by his actions, but they're not, they're liars. And so why do I say that they're liars? Well, if you were truly outraged, you're thinking about bringing charges against the cop. There's no statute of limitations on that, right? He's obviously a super dirty cop who worked for the rich and powerful and screwed over a poor woman who was coming in to report sexual assault.
Yep.
And he took advantage of her. No charges. I would go back and say, no, you don't get to retire, you're fired. And I would try to recover money that he got in the meanwhile, after he did these acts that are clearly wrong. Every dollar that he got from the department, we should try to get back, right? Because he obviously was not here to serve and protect all of us. He did the exact opposite. Did LAPD do any of that? No, of course not, because they're a gang. And gangs look out for each other and they call a thin blue line. Guys, we're not against policing. We've had a lot of fights with even the people on the left wing about policing. We want policing, but we want policing for all of us. It's not too much to ask for. Instead of police that are just hired security for the very, very, very rich and powerful. But when you ask cops to provide security for all of us, they go, oh, my feelings are hurt. My feelings are hurt. I'm not gonna show up to help any of you. When did you ever anyway? Come on, get real. Now back to the suit. Letitia James, oh, okay, look, the Attorney General in New York sticking up for the little guy. Is she? No, the money went predominantly to the shareholders of CBS,
yes,
who are also extraordinarily wealthy. Yep. There might be a couple in there that are middle class, but overall, the great majority of them are very wealthy. So don't get it twisted. It didn't go to the victims. It never goes to the victims. No, and I get why Letitia James did it. Don't get me wrong. It's easier to bring charges and to press forward on civil or criminal, but especially on civil litigation for shareholders because they have certain rights. They have
more
very
rights than anyone else.
That's
honestly.
exactly right.
Yeah.
So, but the problem is with the system that says shareholders get rights, but you don't, right?
Yep.
So I don't mind the shareholders having rights. I think that's good. I think this suit is good. Credit to Letitia James for pursuing it. But wouldn't it be nice if the rest of us had rights too?
Yeah,
it would. She's now passed away, but was she ever going to get money? How about her family? Of course not. Only the beloved shareholders.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we're gonna take a quick break. When we come back, there are more right-wing threats in the country, unfortunately, especially to those who are just trying to exercise their right to vote. But there is a small glimmer of hope, a little bit of good news, so we'll share that with you in regard to that story as well. Come right back.
Next week is the big day, Tuesday. That's midterm elections. We'll be covering it live, of course, as we all do all night long. Me, Anna, Rashad Ritchie, Nina Turner, John Iadarola, David Schuster, J.R. Jackson, Jessica Burbank, Michael Schur. All of us will be here. So Tuesday night, starting at 5 o'clock, 5 o'clock Pacific, 8 o'clock Eastern, right after the Young Turks. So start watching in the morning. In fact, JR's show Watch List is at 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern. Make sure that starts our programming. Make sure you check that out. That's youtube.com/watchlisttyt. And our newest show is Senator Nina Turner's show, and that's at 4 o'clock Eastern. Make sure you're checking that out, youtube.com/unbosstyt. And of course, Food for Thought Trivia is this Friday, that's tomorrow. 100 of you will win $100 in Blue Apron gift cards. I love it when you guys write in and tell us how that's going well for you. All right, in our member section, Sexy Speed Racer says, police colluding with a powerful person to cover up a crime. I'm shocked, I tell you, I'm shocked. John Campbell Reese writes in, I always hated Les Moonves for his horrible creative and artistic decisions. Now I could thoroughly hate him because he's a disgusting human being.
Yeah, he's a really bad person.
Yes.
He just is.
Yeah. McBain, AKA Icy Blue Dragon, that's funny, on Twitch says, I feel bad for Cenk for not having had the opportunity to vent about recent events this whole week. I expect tonight to be loud. I hope I've delivered so far for you. Maple Syrup Dragon 519 says, TYT rocks, wish Canada had fair, honest reporting to fight back against the true North right-wing propaganda. TYT Canadian edition has a nice ring to it. Wink emoji. Okay, I see your wink, and we'll do the best we can. We need more members. NDH 101 says, thanks again for the urgent information, Anna. Our healthcare system is just a big scam for corporate profit, and the SCROTUS is no longer reasonable with all the conservatives expand the damn court. Mouse and a Dragon 1Z writes in, roughly 2 years ago, I went looking for news and not propaganda. Roughly 2 years ago, I found TYT and never left. Thank you, TYT, for all your passion, accuracy, and dedication. We appreciate you. We appreciate you so much. Duwu87 says, can I get a tank top with Anna's saying, do you boo on it for my summertime at the Jersey Shore? Number one, I'll probably run into you there. Number two, that's an excellent suggestion. I'll bring it to the thugs at shoptyt.com. And Nata Dragon says 40 hours a week is full-time employment. How the hell does a child work those hours and still go to school full-time? It's insane.
Yeah, they don't. That's the point.
That's the problem, and that's corporate rule. Back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys.
Well, it's time for a whole segment on right-wing violence because there are endless stories on that very issue. So let's talk about it. The midterm elections are less than a week away from today, and tensions throughout the country are definitely high. In fact, in recent days, right-wing message boards have seen a massive uptick in violent threats directed toward voters and election officials. Now, election workers are being forced to prepare for the absolute worst, and preparing for the absolute worst is probably a really good idea considering what we saw on January 6th and what we're already seeing when it comes to ballot boxes in places like Arizona. Daniel J. Jones, the president of Advanced Democracy, told Vice this: days before the 2022 midterms, we're seeing multiple users on extremist forums promoting election-related violence or using threatening and violent language. While it is unclear how many users online overall are making threats against voters or election officials, several of the users claim to have access to weapons and have consistently made threats against specific political figures. Now, on Reddit, there is a forum called The Donald. I gotta be honest, sometimes I go on it just to laugh at the people who post on there. It's an anonymous user by the name of Hogstooth01 who wrote this: we will post up at every single drop box. If you try to drop off more than one ballot, you will be beaten without question. Better tell your grandma to drop off her own vote because no games are being played this time. You will see violence if caught stuffing ballots in a drop box. So the post was in reference to this ongoing issue in Arizona. There were lawsuits surrounding this issue, and it has to do with vigilante poll watchers who are showing up to ballot boxes and essentially surveilling voters, intimidating voters. They're usually wearing all sorts of like military gear and they have weapons on them. Thankfully, that story, and honestly, surprisingly, that story took a positive turn. So US District Court Judge Michael Liberty, in an unexpected reversal of an earlier ruling in a related case, granted a motion Tuesday for a restraining order in a case consolidating a lawsuit brought by the nonprofit advocacy groups Arizona Alliance for Retired Americans and Voto Latino, with a similar suit brought by the League of Women Voters in Arizona. Both lawsuits accused Clean Elections USA, this is the right-wing group that's doing the intimidation, and the group's founder, Melody Jennings, of carrying out surveillance of voters in a coordinated vigilante intimidation campaign at ballot drop box locations with the express purpose of deterring voters from depositing their ballots. So because of the judge's latest ruling, the members of Clean Elections USA will now have to be far away from the voters as they're dropping off their ballots. They're prohibited from coming within 75 feet of a ballot box. Additionally, any armed or masked individual will be prohibited from coming within 250 feet of a ballot box. They can no longer take photos or videos of the voters as they're dropping off their ballots, openly carry firearms near the ballot boxes, or post information about voters online. So that's a positive update to this story, but that still doesn't do away with the clear vigilante violence that we're seeing.
Yeah, so there's a hilarious, ironic twist in this otherwise disastrous story that I'll get to in a sec. First, guys, this is what fascism looks like. So if you're confused by why that is, wait, this isn't necessarily Republican Party officials doing it, etc. No. When fascism came to Germany, there were these people that were called the brown shirts, and their job was to do vigilante violence. And the reason that they were egged on through propaganda to do vigilante violence is so that the government can have plausible deniability. So that when the Nazis, because remember the Nazis didn't just take over in one day. And it wasn't like the Germans always were in favor of the Nazis. In fact, they never even won an election. They never got anywhere close to a majority. Hitler got a minority of the votes, but somehow wound up becoming president, electoral college, okay? And then he wanted to have plausible deniability for a long time. So he would get the brown shirts to do vigilante violence on his behalf and say, oh, I didn't do it, Hey, both sides are doing it, I can't tell who's who, right? So here we are, where they're literally, and this is the extra dangerous because they're trying to scare Democrats away from voting at all. So they're doing the violence now very specifically at the voting booths. And then the mainstream media, by the way, has nonsense conversations about who's at fault and how can we find a way to blame the victims here and call it 50-50. But guys, that aids and abets the bad guys when you disperse liability to everyone instead of the specific people who are actually doing it. Now, who do you think's responsible for right-wingers threatening violence against Democrats at voting areas? It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that it's the right-wingers, the Republicans, who are threatening violence against the left wing and Democrats. Of course, who else would it be? Martians, lizard people, gay frogs? What insane conspiracy theory do you have for this? But yet mainstream media can't tell. I can't tell who's right and who's wrong. Now, not in stories like this, I want you to understand. But as soon as you're done with this story, they have instant amnesia. And then they go back to Republicans and Democrats are the same, we can't tell the difference. We won't say that Republicans are doing anything wrong, okay? Yeah, they're doing something wrong. They're definitely going towards fascism. And they're trying to intimidate people by threatening violence at this level. Now, having said that, I got two other things out of this story, Anna.
Okay, go ahead.
One is Ron DeSantis has no chance. There are forums named the Donald, okay? There's nothing named the Ronald. There's no.
There might be, but it's not for that Ronald.
It's not.
It's for our good orange-haired clown friend.
Donald Trump is their messiah. He is violent like them. He is entitled like them. He has victimhood like them. He is exactly what they've been looking for, a giant prick who will just oppress everyone that isn't them. DeSantis and those clones have no chance against the real deal.
Trump turned politics into an entertaining sporting event for them.
Yeah,
so
by the
like
way,
that, I don't think Ron DeSantis has the
charisma.
Yeah, it is. It's charisma.
Yeah.
So yeah, Donald Trump does have that, and it appeals to voters who might not be, super engaged or entrenched in like political policy, but they enjoy the rallies. Their politics can be boiled down to one thing and one thing only: owning the libs. That's it. That's all they want. And I get it. Owning the libs is fun, but it doesn't accomplish anything for you or the country in general.
No, what it is hating the others.
Right, that's all it is.
And what did the fascists in Germany do? Focus on hating the others. Now, Hitler, unfortunately, was very charismatic to the German people. The fiery speeches and everybody yelling at the same time. They loved that. They used to go to Hitler rallies so they could do the salute to him, so they could rage against the others.
Yep.
And so, anyway, back to the irony here though. So this guy gets outed for threatening to kill people at voting areas. And then he gets super mad at the press and he says, quote, "I find it disturbing that he would use my real name in the message."
No, the entitlement is amazing. It is the entitlement is amazing. Yeah, of course they're gonna use your name. What are you? You're not a minor. Why would they protect your name? That doesn't make any sense.
No, to the right-wing mind, it does make sense because they think, no, I could threaten to murder you, and that's okay because I'm a right-winger. But if you out my name, that's a giant crime. I am the victim. Because if it happens to you and you're a right-winger, it counts. If it happens to someone else, it doesn't count. Because they're the most selfish, most egotistical, the most entitled clown asses you'll ever see in your entire life. And now they're driven to violence, and now violence around voting areas.
Yes.
So this is exactly how fascism comes.
But again, the good news here with this Arizona case and the vigilantes in Arizona intimidating voters at ballot drop boxes is that a federal judge ruled against them, and now they have to abide by these rules. And I saved the best for last. So remember, the group that we're talking about here, the vigilante group, Clean Elections USA, was founded by this woman named
oh my God, don't say her name.
Melody Jennings. Is
oh
her
my
name.
God, are you okay,
it.
Melody? Are you okay?
Yeah, no one cares if she's okay. So Melody Jennings, so she has to, according to the judge's ruling, put out a statement indicating that what she's been lying to everyone about is in fact a lie, and she has to inform them of the truth. So addressing Clean Elections USA and its founders' promotion of a false claim accusing some voters of being so-called ballot mules, Liberty, who's the judge, ordered Jennings to write a post on Truth Social stating that there are several reasons why voters in Arizona can legally return more than one ballot to a ballot drop box site. Per the judge's order, Jennings, who made the post on Wednesday, also included the relevant Arizona law on returning more than one ballot. We'll get to her post in a moment, but let me just note, look, think about how much they are actually hurting voters that might actually vote for their preferred candidates. Part of the reason why ballot harvesting is allowed is because like in some states, people vote in like rural areas, they might be disabled, they might not have the mobility necessary to get to a voting place or a ballot drop-off box. And so they'll have a family member or someone else drop it off for them, okay? It's not some crazy conspiracy to stuff the ballot drop-off boxes with fraudulent Democratic votes.
By the way, guys, if it was, we would despise it. Why?
We would despise it.
Well, number one, the Republicans would be the first one to do it if they could, okay? In fact, almost all the voter fraud cases in America are of Republicans going, oh, I had to cheat so because I heard the Democrats were cheating, so I voted for Donald Trump 48 times. I don't know what you're talking about, man. All right, it's their fault. So they would be the first to. Second of all, we're progressives. You know who would be second to cheat? Corporate Democrats. We would get screwed the most. So I want the elections to be as fair as humanly possible.
Okay, let me just say, look, there's the moral part of it, and I think that's what you're getting at, right? But like, I also I wouldn't feel good knowing that the party I root for won because we cheated. I would feel like a massive loser. Do you not understand that?
Forget that. I would be the first one to turn them in.
Dude, I'd be so embarrassed. It's like, no, obviously the people aren't buying what we're selling.
Here,
right?
we turn in the Democrats all the time. We tell you they take donations from corporations and then they serve corporations.
Yep.
We've shown it literally thousands of times on air. Why would we hide if they were cheating at the ballot box?
It's so
right?
lame.
They're not. But and guys, one last thing. You think like nobody can actually believe these insane lies that they say about ballot mules and how if you went to drop off something, the ballots for your wife or your husband as you're dropping off that you should be murdered because you were a ballot mule. No one could possibly believe that, right? No. They actually genuinely believe it. Remember, they don't need half the country to believe it. They just need a couple of lunatics on their side who are heavily armed to believe it, because a couple of acts of terrorism gets them the exact kind of vigilante violence they want to suppress the votes of the other guys, to intimidate their opponents, and then be able to go above the law and destroy our democracy. That's what the Republican Party's doing right now. If anybody isn't telling you that, they're purposely lying to you.
Well, more right-wing violence, including a Molotov cocktail fail when we come back.
So guys, don't forget, we're trying to hold the Supreme Court accountable. They're ruling on affirmative action soon, and we're doing hashtag lose the legacy. Okay, so make sure you do that and tag at TYT Nation while you're doing that. It would be the biggest hypocrisy, although perfectly expected, if they said yes, affirmative action for poor people is now gone, but for rich people, we're gonna keep the legacy. No, hashtag lose the legacy. So now I'm going to members. Art Guy says, in a world gone mad, I'm so glad we have TYT holding strong and bring the facts without fear. Thank you. We thank you back.
Are you guys real? Like, sometimes when you're reading the comments, sometimes when I'm reading the comments, it's like, it's such a disconnect from every other piece of feedback I feel like I get all day, every day. Like Twitter is a cesspool. Like it's just, thank you. Thank you for writing in. Thank you for the support. Thank you for the validation. We could not do this without you.
Yeah, and they're absolutely real because so when you go, I went to New York. I'll talk more about it in the bonus episode. But when you go to New York, you run into viewers all the time, nonstop, right? And then you see what the real world is, as opposed to the fake world of Twitter and mainstream media and cable news. It's almost all of media is nonstop gaslighting. Everything is meant to distort your reality, not to give you actual reality. So speaking of actual reality, Punch Up writes in, I can't wait till an AMA. I have to know, Cenk, when you were Mr. Jamaica, did they measure your triceps?
Oh my God, why would you enable him right now? Like, why would you do that?
In brackets, which I saved until your reaction, Anna hates me now.
Yeah.
That's why they did it. No, that's why they did it, to get under your skin.
I don't hate you, but please don't bring up his triceps or the Mr. Jamaica thing.
Well, agree to disagree. All right, here we go. Stephen Fett gifted 10 subs on Twitch. We appreciate it. Maple Syrup Dragon 519 said TYT rocks. Wish Canada. Oh, I already read that one. Sorry. Leftinos says, Cenk, good to see you back. Eating my delicious free Blue Apron meal while invoking my best Cenk yelling at frustrating cluelessness of these corporate Dems. Let's go TYT fam. Bash the fash.
Yes.
Janine 123 said, as a white person, I can say with confidence, I've never been discriminated against for being white. Being poor, yes, but white, never. So that's a great point and that very normal. All right, let me see. There's a couple powerful ones here. I want to be able to find them. RM Snow wrote in as a YouTube member. 6 months, yay. Anna, I know you've been feeling politically homeless, but for what it's worth, TYT feels like mine after years of being disengaged from politics. Thanks for everything you all do.
Thank you.
And RM, thank you, brother. And we do it together. The members do it. You're a member. We all do it together.
RM what?
Snow. And so many people wrote in about Medicaid and how they're worried to death that it's going to get taken away because of loved ones. We're fighting for you. All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. Also, Eli Etheridge just became a member. Eli, thank you. We appreciate it, brother. And so some of you wrote in some powerful stuff, including on Super Chat. We'll do that in the members only episode that's coming up in about 15 minutes. So tyt.com/join. We'll see you there. All right, Casper, what's next?
Well, let's talk about another act of violence in the country, unfortunately. A man in Tulsa, Oklahoma thought it would be a great idea to retaliate against a donut shop that held a drag event by throwing a Molotov cocktail through its window. Now, luckily, the guy is super incompetent and his plan to set the place on fire did not work. It was a defective Molotov cocktail. Now, the donut hole posted security footage of the attack. We'll take a look at it and describe it for our audio audience, our podcast audience. So you see the guy walk up to the donut shop. I don't know what he's doing there.
No, he posted a letter explaining why he's doing it, which is that he hates people that are LGBT.
Okay, so
then the clown tries to break the glass but can't, beginning to show his incompetence.
Super alpha, super alpha. There he is trying to light this Molotov cocktail, and he throws it through the window and runs away. Now, the attempt to firebomb the place didn't work. Luckily, authorities said that there was minimal physical damage to the property. But the donut shop says this isn't the first time they've dealt with this is clearly like a hate crime, right? They were targeted because of a drag event that they had.
Well, the guy posted a letter saying this is a hate crime and I'm doing this because I hate you.
Their property was damaged previously, and they suspect that that was another targeted attack as well. So they said that someone had smashed windows out of the building on October 16th. That was the night after another drag event they had. Last night we had the privilege of being able to be part of the vision of the Queen's Dirty Dozen. By the way, this isn't even a kid event, right? Like it's just a drag event at a donut shop. Like let people live. Can people live? Can people live, please? Why, like, do we have to abide by whatever your freaking preferences are because you're on the right wing? You wanna be a freaking judgy fuddy-duddy? Do it in the comfort of your own home. Go ahead, write your hateful comments online. Let other people, let other adults just enjoy their lives. Anyway, just had to get that out there because they're such buzzkills, these people.
Yeah, well, Anna, so I want to talk about how the right wingers are, a lot of them are terrorists now in a second. But to your point, this is the dumbass party that claims that they love freedom. And then when people say, hey, I want to be free to be a drag queen and eat donuts, they're like, you're not allowed to have that freedom, I will murder you if you try to have freedom in this country. And they genuinely believe it because what do you want me to call them? You want me to call them smart? You want me to say that they love America? No, they hate America. They're like, everybody being equal, I'll firebomb you if you think you're equal to me.
No, and by the way, I mean, there's a lot of ignorance baked into hatred. And there's so much fear mongering about the transgender community in right-wing circles right now in right-wing media that these individuals think that like drag queens and transgender people are the same thing. They're not the same thing. They're very much different.
It doesn't matter. They just look at them and go, I want to sleep with them and I hate myself.
Okay,
so what should I do?
I mean,
I should do firebombing.
You know what? take the advice of your hero, Jordan Peterson, and clean your room. Because if you're really concerned about men dressing like women, I mean, I don't know. We can go ahead, let's go to graphic 5. Is this some left-wing progressive, or is that Steven Crowder, who never misses out on any opportunity to dress like a woman? Any opportunity,
100%.
Okay? There's more,
By
lots
the way,
of examples. There's
every
another one.
bro in Halloween.
Here's another one. Must be a predator, right? He must be a predator.
Yeah, why is this guy allowed in some bathrooms, et cetera, right? No, they love doing it. And remember J. Edgar Hoover, the biggest right-winger probably in American history, that ran the FBI for decades. And he would bash gay people and blacks and rule with an iron fist. Then it turns out he was a cross-dresser, okay? And lived with a guy for a very long time. It's self-hatred that Steven Crowder, J. Edgar Hoover, this pathetic terrorist in this story, and a huge percentage of Republicans are. They're all self-haters who want to then punish others for their own insecurity.
Because they refuse to go to therapy and deal with
get a therapist.
Go to therapy.
Jesus Christ, man, and leave us the rest alone. We are for freedom, okay? And they think, no, if you don't agree with me sexually, I gotta agree with you sexually, you freaking losers? Go get your own life, okay? What are you're worried about my sex life, you losers? Go get your own sex life, okay?
Yeah.
And so look, I'm not directing it at young guys who can't get a date. I've been there, okay? But we were all involuntarily celibate at some point, okay? But I'm talking about the guys who then go, I can't get a date, so I gotta go hurt someone else, okay? No, fix yourself instead of trying to bring others down. Now I want to talk about terrorism. This guy's a vigilante and he's a brown shirt, he's a fascist. And then we have a question about, gee, I wonder where they came from. Like we're still having a debate. Was it because of Donald Trump that they rioted on January 6th? No, it was because of Jimmy Carter. Are you guys serious? Anyone debating that, are you serious? Gee, I wonder why they did it. Has there ever been a giant riot after a Bernie Sanders rally?
Can you imagine?
No, like the little birds land on his lectern and everybody applauds. And he's called Bernie Sanders, right? You know why they riot after Trump rallies? Because he tells them, you should do something. They took this away from you. And he looks like goddamn Hitler, driving them to complete and utter violence. And every time they do terrorism like this, the right wing comes in and goes, well, they shouldn't have been drag queens in the first place. You know what? We need to protect our kids, not from the right-wing terrorists who try to murder people with that firebomb, but we need to protect them from transgender people and gay people. What if they find out that there are gay people in the world? Remember, we have to take their freedom away. Says the goddamn Republicans pretending to be in favor of freedom. When they say freedom, they mean freedom for me, not for you.
100%. I mean, George Tiller getting shot and killed because he was providing abortions for women, by someone who purported to be pro-life. Super pro-life to murder someone because you disagree with the medical services they provide.
Yeah, and I'll say this last thing because we always say it because we're the good guys. Do not do anything physical. Do not strike back. Do not do violence. Do not do any of that. You know why? Because we're better than them. And we fight within the realm of politics and rhetoric, and we fight in the battlefield of ideas. Cowards fight with guns and Molotov cocktails because they're too stupid to fight in the battlefield of ideas where we slaughter them. Again, not physical, not violence. Ideologically, we slaughter them. Since they lose so badly and they're so dumb, they resort to physical violence, vigilante violence, and terrorism over and over again. And it is not even. 98% of it is right-wingers that encourage, hey, we lost, we're dumbasses, so go hit them, go murder them, go firebomb them. That's the right wing.
I'm gonna counterbalance your rage with a comment from John Campbell, who's watching us right now. First, how do you make a defective Molotov cocktail? It is the most basic weapon in the world. Second, why write an explanation letter on paper that will burn to somewhere you want to break down?
That's such a good point.
This is beyond beta, it's Omega.
I love our members. In fact, give him a $100 Blue Apron gift card. Okay.
Give it to him.
Okay, so I'm not kidding. We give away $100 real gift cards to our members all the time for good comments. We do this show together with the members. tyt.com/join.
You feed our soul, we feed your stomach.
Ooh, good one.
Right, good motto.
Okay, I like it.
All right.
We got time for another one?
We do, let's do it. Jay. Man by the name of Jay Manzini, not his real name. His real name is actually Jabara Igbara, which is actually a better name if you ask me, is an Instagram influencer who's gonna be spending some time in prison because he decided to run a Ponzi crypto scheme through which he scammed his followers out of $8 million. So let's tell you how this all went down. Igbara, who ran a popular Instagram account under the name Jay Manzini, solicited money from Muslim New Yorkers ostensibly in return for stock, electronics, and COVID-19 protective equipment, according to federal prosecutors in Brooklyn. The influencer was posting ads on his Instagram stories claiming he was buying Bitcoin at premiums of 5% over market value. So basically, give me your Bitcoins, I'm gonna pay you more than they're worth, and people unfortunately fell for it. So after agreeing on prices and payment methods, Manzini would send his followers images and payment media of the transactions. They in turn sent the Bitcoin to his wallet, but the money never arrived. The documents were actually forged. He also did this thing where he would show up at grocery stores and offer to pay for people's groceries to make it appear as though he was altruistic and also fabulously wealthy, to just give his followers this idea that no, he's the real deal. Look at how rich he is. He's paying for other people's groceries. There was even a video he put out where he's giving strangers wads of cash while he's standing alongside 50 Cent. And again, it was all a scam. So let me give you more details. He pocketed at least $8 million in the scam and blew all the cash on personal expenses and gambling, according to the feds. But he wasn't done just yet. He did more. He then launched a second scheme to repay apparent returns he had promised his victim by posting on the Instagram page that he would pay above market rate sums for cryptocurrencies. Igbara then sent his victims doctored images of wire transfers. I sent the wire transfer, it's on the way. Purportedly showing payment for the crypto. In reality, Igbara was stealing the currency. And yes, that was an Anna Delvey reference. How could I not?
Yeah, so apparently this is like the oldest trick in the book, right? So I saw a movie on Netflix, Tinder Swindler. And so the way that the guy got money from all the women that he targeted in that case, was that he would pretend to be super rich. And so, and by the way, Bernie Madoff pretended to be super rich. And so, well, if he's doing this well, then I might as well give him money. Almost every scam starts with, now look, I'm a prince in Nigeria and I'm really rich, but I'm gonna need your money first.
Yeah, no,
right?
It's 100%. And by the way, I feel like there's a ton of this on social media, on YouTube, like the faux financial advisors. Don't take financial advice from randos on YouTube and social media.
Especially if they're telling you about how great Bitcoin is and they have it covered and all you have to do is just trust them. Look, it happens in every context. Like, so I like gambling. My friends, I never get any of this because I don't, if I wanted gambling advice, then I wouldn't gamble. I like to gamble because I'm trying to predict who wins, right? That's the fun of it. Anyways, my friends do it and every time they're like, oh, sure winner. I got a sure winner. Just give me money first and I'll tell you who's gonna win. Hey, if you're so sure, why don't you bet on it? So of course it's nonsense. How the hell would you know what a sure winner is? Why are you paying above market prices? When somebody tells you I'm gonna pay you above market prices, watch out. They're very likely coming for your wallet.
Unless you're trying to trade in your used car right now, you might get above market value for it. I know.
That's actually true, but a very rare instance of a market because of shortages, etc.
Yeah.
And so you need to do that at tyt.com. Now we're kidding, okay? So the only part of the story that I like, and I feel terrible because he's.
No, don't feel terrible. He's a bad person.
No, not for him. I hate the guy.
Okay.
For the guys for the people he ripped off. Because they fell for it. They mean well and then they fell for it because greed is real, right? And they got suckered. But for him, I love that he lost all the money anyway.
I love it. By the way, so he could spend 20 years in prison on these charges alone, but he actually got in trouble previously because he and his wife kidnapped one of his enemies. This is insane. So he ended up pleading guilty in this case and will serve 5 years in prison for this alone. He and his wife then beat the man unconscious and threatened to kill him with a machete.
Yeah, no, look, man, just please, for God's sake, give him 20 years. I know people who steal a lot of money never get a lot of time, but set an example here. He's ripping off poor innocent people. All right, we got to go to the bonus episode. In there, shoes for horses, obviously. And I've got a story, a devastating story about how gay people are actually being treated in Florida as we speak. So tyt.com/join, bonus episode. It's got funny stuff, it's got tragic stuff. Anyways, or if you're on YouTube, hit the join button below. We love you, we'll see you there in a minute.
Hey everyone, Matteo Scarapo here, author of Black Buck, which is Shop TYT's first fiction book ever. I'm honored. So, Black Buck is about a young man named Darren who's living in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. He lives with his mom, he has his girlfriend, he has his best friend, he has his neighborhood, and his neighborhood has him. Darren's also working at a Starbucks in Midtown Manhattan. And one day, this man, real suave and good looking, comes in and asks Darren to give him his regular. But for some reason, Darren says